Chapter 1283. Damn it! How can he still catch up to me? Powerful killing intent appeared in the clone's eyes. With a dark expression, he charged forward in the whirlwind. When the whirlwind blew at his body, sharp stabs of pain appeared on his skin. He knew that he could not stay in the whirlwind for too long. With the strength of his physical body, he could last for some time, but if he stayed for too long, he would end up like the ancient god in the past. He had originally thought that he had shaken off Su Ming's tail and forced out the silver threads. Su Ming had lost track of him and would be forced to give up when he could no longer search for him. This had given him enough time, but he did not expect that Su Ming would still be getting closer to him, even without the guidance of the silver threads. Less than the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn after the clone roared with a dark expression on his face, his expression changed drastically. The space in the whirlwind behind him distorted, and a figure walked out. The figure lifted his right hand and tore at the whirlwind in front of him, and the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, and the whirlwind shattered with a bang. The figure stepped on the shattered whirlwind and walked forward. When his face was revealed, he was naturally Su Ming, who had chased after him. I have indeed underestimated you, my clone that practices the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. Su Ming seemed to know what the clone was thinking. Once he walked out, he spoke faintly, then lifted his right hand and pointed forward. Mountain Shifter. When he said those two words, the galaxy roared. The whirlwind shuddered, and countless mountains manifested in all directions. The moment Su Ming attacked, he had used one of his strongest divine abilities. The clone's expression changed. When he moved back, a sharp glare appeared in his eyes. He lifted his right hand as well and pointed at the air. Mountain Shifter. It was the same divine ability and the same art. Su Ming had executed it with his cultivation base, and the clone had activated it with his physical power. The difference was that Su Ming had summoned thousands of mountains around him, while the clone that practiced the art that practiced hollow shadows whole had an illusory mountain appear around him. He was using his body as a mountain to fight against Su Ming's art. Su Ming's eyes focused. He was no longer surprised that the clone understood the Mountain Shifter art as well. But what surprised him was that the art could change to such a degree in the clone's hands. This was something he did not understand in the past. Looks like you've not only gained your own consciousness, but also obtained some serendipity, Su Ming said coldly. He lowered his right hand, and in an instant, countless mountains roared. Each of them contained all of Su Ming's power, and they charged towards the clone. The shape of the mountain had completely taken shape around the clone. Once it turned into a huge mountain, it crashed into the mountains coming at him from all directions. Booming sounds echoed in the air, and all the mountains shattered inch by inch. The clone coughed up blood when the mountain around him shattered, but he still lifted his right hand and slammed it against his chest. With it, he threw his head back and roared. His body instantly withered, and as Su Ming's pupils shrank, his body looked as if it had changed shape. Right before his eyes, Su Ming saw the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole turn into a gigantic crimson python phoenix. It had a gigantic body and a colorful light. As the crimson python phoenix roared, it shot through the air and charged into the distance at a speed that surpassed its previous speed. When it saw that it was about to escape, Su Ming let out a cold harumph. When he lifted his right hand, he formed two of his fingers into a blade, and with a step forward, he brought them down swiftly. Godslayer art. The Godslayer art was based on the laws of fate. When Su Ming executed it before he reached Fate Realm, he was already incredibly powerful. Once he mastered the laws of fate, when he executed this art, it would shake the sky and earth. The first to be cut was the law in the area, followed by the power that would definitely strike. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the crimson python phoenix, formed by the clone, who had already fled into the distance, let out a shrill scream of pain. His body shattered with a bang, but he did not crumble. Instead, he continued charging forward regardless of the cost. But soon after, the third divine ability from the Godslayer art, the rebound, rose swiftly. The booming sounds that rang out were even stronger, causing the crimson python phoenix's body to completely crumble. As its flesh and blood became a bloody mess, it turned back into the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. His face was pale, but he still stepped into the air and disappeared without a trace. If it had been any other cultivator, they would have definitely died in the face of Su Ming's continuous attacks. But the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole possessed a powerful physical body that even Su Ming did not possess. The strength of his physical body was enough to allow him to move about freely in the whirlwind, so it was only natural that he would not be killed so easily. At this point, you should be able to think of that place, right? Su Ming smiled coldly. He did not think that he would be able to capture the clone this time. After all, he could be said to be the person who understood this clone the most. He knew just how difficult it was to deal with this clone's physical body, which was why he had told Hu Zi that he needed some time. Yet in truth, killing the clone was not difficult for Su Ming, but he did not want to kill him. He wanted to possess him a second time. At that moment, he moved and started chasing after the clone once more. The more heavily injured he is, the more difficult it will be for him to move about in the whirlwind. Next time, when I catch up to him, I'll be able to capture him alive. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. With an incredibly quick speed, he tore through the whirlwind and left. Damn it, I must still have his marks on me. The clone's face was incredibly pale, and his expression grew even darker. Su Ming's two great divine abilities had already injured him. If he had not been chased down, he would have immediately searched for a place to heal himself. Su Ming's final Godslayer art had nearly cut his body in half, which caused his injuries to become incredibly severe. Previously, he had only felt slight stabs of pain when he moved about in the whirlwind, and he knew that he could not stay in it for long. But now that he was in the whirlwind, not only did the clone feel intense pain on his skin, even his insides were trembling even more violently. He knew that his injuries had caused his ability to resist the whirlwind to become weaker, and it had shortened the amount of time he could move about in it. And Su Ming's thoughts were definitely to use this method to force him into a corner. As the clone charged forward, his eyes sparkled. When he noticed that Su Ming had shifted even closer to him, a hint of madness appeared in the clone's eyes. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being merciless. The clone moved and changed his direction. He no longer charged forward, but instead moved to the right, leaving into the distance in the face of the whirlwind. When heavenly incense awakened its spirit, not only did it allow me to gain intelligence, it also allowed me to absorb the memories left behind by quite a number of cultivators in true Morning Tao world in the heavenly incense rune over the countless years. One of them mentioned the third mysterious place in true Morning Tao world, besides Death rune and heavenly incense rune, the sun sinking talisman. The galaxy there is always dark, and divine senses cannot leave the body. A cultivator's 5 senses are sealed there, and even their cultivation bases are suppressed. Su Ming, since you're asking for death, then I will devour you in the galaxy where the sun sinking talisman is. Even if I can't devour you, divine senses will be limited there, and my cultivation base will be suppressed. I like to see how you'll be able to find me then. There was a murderous look on the clone's face. Once he changed his direction, he charged towards the sun-sinking talisman, which was not too far away and was about 5 days away. You and I will not rest until one of us dies. This is not a grudge. This is freedom. Only when I kill you will I be completely free, and from then on, I will be Su Ming. The clone's expression twisted. As he charged forward, he was worried that Su Ming would catch up to him. After struggling for a moment, he gritted his teeth, and his body let out a bang. His skin turned crimson red, and gradually, it fell off to reveal blood-red flesh. At the same time, his flesh shrank again, as if it wanted to grow into his bones. Waves of indescribable pain caused the clone to grit his teeth and descend into madness. Pain. Only this sort of extreme pain can stimulate all the potential in my body. He gritted his teeth, and in an instant, his speed reached limitless. He charged straight for the sun-sinking talisman. As he moved forward, The flesh and blood of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole slowly sank into his bones under the intense pain. This might sound incomprehensible, but in truth, this was a forbidden art that allowed the bones to be outside while the flesh and blood to be inside. Flesh regrowth art on white bone. This is a forbidden art I sensed in the heavenly incense rune that can stimulate my subconscious for a short period of time and increase my speed by several fold. The clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole no longer had a face, but had turned into white bones. Within those bones was a mass of flesh and blood, and he no longer looked like a human. However, by doing so, his speed instantly increased by several fold. In the blink of an eye, he widened the distance between him and Su Ming, who was chasing after him. As Su Ming chased after him, his expression changed. As a brilliant light shone in his eyes, he noticed that the clone's speed had surpassed his imagination. In the blink of an eye, he was about to leave the area he could sense. Without any hesitation, Su Ming leaped up and patted his storage bag with his right hand. Once he sent his divine thought into it, a roar reverberated in the air, and the resentful Wei's body appeared. After falling into deep sleep, its presence had become slightly stronger, but its level of cultivation was not its forte. What was most skilled in was speed. Once the resentful Wei appeared, Su Ming stood on its body and instantly shot through space to chase after the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. The clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole fled, while Su Ming used the resentful Wei to chase after him. 3 days passed, and the clone swiftly rushed into a dark galaxy. There was no whirlwind in the dark galaxy. Even if it fused into the place, it would turn into darkness. The galaxy looked incredibly vast, like a black ocean that hid all light and all things within it. 6 hours after the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole rushed into the dark galaxy, the resentful Wei's burning body appeared. Without stopping, it brought Su Ming into the dark galaxy as well. Only Su Ming stood on the resentful Wei's body when it stepped into the dark galaxy. As he stared at it, a glint appeared in his eyes. It's just as I expected. Once I come to the land with the sun-sinking talisman, it won't be difficult to kill the clone. The difficult part is to possess him a second time, and this is the best place for me to do so. A hint of a smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. Recommendation votes. Chapter 1284. The sun-sinking talisman was one of the 3 great mysteries of true Morning Dao world. It was on par with the heavenly incense rune and Death region in terms of its mysteriousness. No one knew its origins, as if it had existed since true Morning Dao world was born, just like the heavenly incense rune. Over the countless years, an unknown number of cultivators had come to this place in an attempt to study the sun-sinking talisman. In fact, there were even some who wanted to take the talisman as their own so that it would acknowledge them as its master. But they had never succeeded. Waves of cultivators came and left, and the talisman continued existing in the galaxy as if it would last for eternity. There was no end to it. It had witnessed true Morning Dao world reaching its peak, and it had also seen it slowly returning to its current state of nothingness. It continued floating quietly, as if it would remain the same even if 1 million years passed. Compared to the vortex in Death region, which prevented living beings from entering, the sun-sinking talisman was like a door that allowed all cultivators to enter. Compared to the strange power of the heavenly incense rune, which allowed clones to become independent and the cultivators who came to this place to be immersed in the fake breakthrough in their cultivation base, unable to extricate themselves from it and injure their souls. In fact, if they were the slightest bit careless, they might never be able to walk out again. The sun-sinking talisman was much gentler. Cultivators could come and go as they pleased. This place would not harm them. However, once they stepped into this pitch-black world, their cultivation would be suppressed, and their divine sense would be restricted within their bodies, unable to spread out. Cultivators would become mortals here, and people who could open their eyes to see the world would become blind here. It seemed that this was the only use of the sun-sinking talisman. That was why, compared to the heavenly incense rune and Death region, the number of people who came to the sun-sinking talisman was the highest, and it was also the safest place. Of course, the prerequisite was that there was no killing. In truth, that was the case. Over the countless years, there had been quite a number of people who died in the dark world of the sun-sinking talisman, but it was certain that all the people who died were not killed by the strange power of the sun-sinking talisman. Instead, they were killed by the people who had come together with them. At that moment, it was clearly the case for Su Ming's clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. Su Ming stood on the resentful Wei's body and rushed into the dark world with it. At the instant he stepped into it, he felt his divine sense being suppressed by a powerful pressure. It bounced back into his body, and it could only spread out on his skin. It could not leave his body. For a cultivator, losing their divine sense was the same as losing one of their eyes. There was no light here, only darkness. Even if they condensed their cultivation base, they still wouldn't be able to see clearly. This was the same as losing one of their eyes. Staying here, they would become blind. At the same time, Su Ming's level of cultivation also sensed a powerful suppression at the instant he stepped into the dark world. This suppression was weak, but incredibly strong. It instantly suppressed Su Ming's level of cultivation from Fate Realm to Mastery Realm, and by the looks of it, the closer Su Ming got to the center of the world, the stronger the pressure on his level of cultivation would be. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. Without any hesitation, he charged forward with a resentful Wei. He did not need to search for the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. He believed that the clone would come to him on his own. Besides, even if the clone did not come to him on his own, Su Ming still had a way to find it. After all, the world where the sun-sinking talisman was where Su Ming wanted the clone to come to. In truth, during the chase, the clone had been like prey to Su Ming. With the ingenious hints in his heart and his pursuit, the clone's only choice was to come to this place. As he moved forward, Su Ming's expression remained the same. He might not be able to see anything around him, but the resentful Wei beneath him seemed to be very familiar with the darkness. As it charged forward, it did not show any signs of discomfort. This was something Su Ming had already expected. After all, the resentful Wei came from the relocation void in Divine Essence Star Ocean. That place might look colorful, but in truth, most of it was dark all year round. The resentful Wei that lived there was naturally much more familiar with the darkness than a normal person. This was one of the reasons why Su Ming chose this place, especially because he wanted to use the connection between him and the resentful Wei. At the instant Su Ming closed his eyes and his mind fused with the resentful Wei, he used the resentful Wei's eyes to see a world that most cultivators could not see in the dark world. It was a gray world. Besides gray, there was no other color. The area around him was empty, and right in front of him was a gigantic gray screen of light. It swayed continuously like a candle flame. With the resentful Wei's eyes, Su Ming swept his gaze through the area, but he did not see the clone. However, the dark world was too big, which was why it was not strange that he could not see it in such a small area. However, Su Ming's closed eyes moved slightly. He might not have opened them, but he lifted his right hand and clenched his fist in the direction above him. It doesn't matter whether you're willing to stay here or not. Since you're here, then don't even think about leaving. A hint of pride appeared on Su Ming's face. It was the confidence that everything was in his hands. When Su Ming clenched his right fist, the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole charged forward and rushed out of the dark world. Once he did so, his eyes lit up and he saw the galaxy. When he turned his head around, a ferocious smile appeared on his lips, along with a smug look. You're my real body, my personality, and are more or less affected by you. That's why, since you can use this to figure out my thoughts, I can also use it to plot against you. When I was chased by you, my instinctive thought was to find a place where I could restrict you and devour you, which is why I chose this place. But isn't this also a false move of mine? I lured you to this place, then left. You, Su Ming, just continue believing in your own thoughts, and that I will take the initiative to attack you in this place. When you notice that something is off, I will have long since left true Morning Dao world. As the clone laughed coldly, he charged into the distance. Just as he was about to leave the place, a buzzing sound reverberated in the galaxy. At the instant it appeared, the clone's expression changed, and he came to a swift halt. His expression was incredibly dark, and he no longer moved forward. Instead, he swiftly retreated, because before him he saw a wave of white ripples that looked like waves charging towards him. By the looks of it, this was only a small part of the ripples, and the extent of its spread was the entire area where the sun-sinking talisman was located. The ripples came from Su Ming's supreme treasure. At the instant he stepped into the place, he sent the supreme treasure out, causing it to float above him while continuously growing larger. When it covered the entire area of the sun-sinking talisman, it turned into ripples that turned into a seal that was a cage, and it started shrinking. In this way, it was equivalent to turning this place into a true prison. If the clone wanted to force his way out, he would probably be immediately sealed within the supreme treasure's pressure. This forced him to retreat and return to the pitch-black world of the sun-sinking talisman. Damn it! For the first time, panic appeared on the clone's face. He thought that he had calculated everything, but in the end, he realized that Su Ming's calculations were always one step ahead of his, causing him to be completely suppressed. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. The clone no longer had any other choice. He gritted his teeth, and madness appeared on his face. In the dark world, even if his cultivation base was suppressed, and even if he could not spread his divine sense outwards, cultivation base and divine sense were all external objects to the clone. His true strength lay in his physical body. With a howl, the physical body moved about in the dark world, bringing with it the killing intent and madness of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. Su Ming's expression was calm. In the dark world, he could only see a great galaxy through the resentful Wei's eyes. He simply allowed the resentful Wei to charge forward. Time trickled by, and as Su Ming's cultivation base approached the core, it was gradually suppressed again. He was about to be pushed down from Mastery Realm to Solar Culpa Realm. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the gray world before Su Ming's eyes. That figure was formed by an endless amount of lines, and it exuded a presence that did not fit in with the world. Almost at the instant it appeared, it was immediately devoured by the gray world around it. Even if it was just the outline of the figure, Su Ming could tell with just one glance that it was his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. He could not see the clone's expression, but when he looked at the threads that formed the figure's outline in the gray world, he sensed a thick, murderous aura coming from them. He saw that the clone was originally charging in another direction, but he suddenly came to a halt and looked towards him. This scene caused a thought to appear in Su Ming's heart. Spirituality. This should be the spirituality of the Crimson Python Phoenix awakened after he obtained an independent will. That's why he can vaguely sense my existence in the darkness. Su Ming came to an understanding. At that moment, the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole swiftly closed in on him without a single sound. He had already lifted his right hand, as if he was gathering his strength to deliver a fatal strike. Even if it's a physical body, it's still suppressed here. Judging by the time it takes to gather its strength, it should have fallen from Mastery Realm. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. When he saw the clone swiftly closing in on him, a glint appeared in his eyes. He lifted his right foot and took a step forward, instantly walking out of the resentful Wei's body. In an instant, he appeared in front of the clone. The clone's expression changed swiftly. Clearly, he had noticed something. He wanted to retreat, but it was already too late. Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized the air in his direction. The clone let out a low roar and lifted his right hand to gather all his power to hurl a punch at Su Ming's right hand. Booming sounds exploded in the dark world. Su Ming let out a harumph. He did not retreat, but instead moved forward. The clone's expression changed drastically. When he coughed up blood, his body tumbled backwards. Chapter 1285. Why you? You can see me. The clone's mind was in a mess at that moment. He had not expected that Su Ming would be able to see his surroundings clearly in the dark world formed by the sun-sinking talisman. The clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole believed that there was no way he would be wrong about this. Su Ming could clearly see his surroundings. After all, the clone had been able to sense Su Ming not because he could see him, but because of the connection he had with his real body. In his eyes, Su Ming's existence was like a huge ball of fire. The reason why Su Ming could not use this connection to detect the clone was similar to the difference in size. Due to the small size of the small, it would not be easy to notice the large, and due to the large size, it would be very obvious in the eyes of the small. At that moment, the clone was almost scared out of his wits. As he retreated, a cold sneer appeared on Su Ming's lips, and he took a step forward to chase after him. "I'd like to see how you'll run this time." Su Ming's words were ghastly, and there was a mighty pressure in them that caused the clone's heart to tremble. As he retreated, the clone gritted his teeth. With a roar, he cast the forbidden art that stimulated the potential in his body by placing his bones on the outside and his flesh on the inside, causing his speed to instantly increase exponentially. At the instant Su Ming lifted his right hand to seize the air, he dodged the attack by a hair's breadth and fled madly. Su Ming let out a cold harumph. He lifted his right hand and clenched his fist above his head. Booming sounds immediately surged into the sky. The white ring Su Ming had released previously had already entered the dark world as it continued shrinking. The ripples on the ring looked like a barrier that could not be shaken. As it shrank, the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole could not escape. He could only turn into a spirit within the barrier. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. He moved forward and chased after the fleeing clone. At that moment, the clone was indeed incredibly fast, but there was naturally a drawback to this art being known as a forbidden art. It could not be used for long, especially when the clone had to cast it twice in succession. He only had the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn. Once that time passed, not only would he immediately slow down, his body would also be heavily injured. But if he didn't do that, what else could he do? He gritted his teeth and sped forward, blood seeping out of the corners of his mouth. He ignored everything else as he rushed towards the core of this pitch-black world, where the sun's sinking talisman was. Only there might be a chance of survival. In the outside world, the rumbling reverberated. It was the sound of the ripples from the ring sweeping and contracting. That represented a dead end. Only where the sun-sinking talisman was, where the cultivation of both sides were suppressed to the extreme, could the clone see a chance of survival. That was why he used his full speed regardless of the cost. He was confident that he could reach that place in the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn. However, he could not see Su Ming chasing after him, and a hint of derision appeared on his lips. This consciousness that was born from the heavenly incense formation is very similar to me, but it's a bit more flustered and a bit less cautious. Once it encounters a life or death crisis like this, its mind will be thrown into chaos. Run, at most 10 breaths at a time. Let's see how you keep running. Su Ming chased after him at a moderate pace. He sensed that his level of cultivation had been suppressed to the point that it had fallen to Mastery Realm. Even Solar Culpa Realm became unstable, and when he turned into Lunar Culpa Realm, his power was reduced to the level of those who had attained great completion in World Plane Realm. And it only lasted for 16 breaths. At that moment, the clone coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. His body shuddered. He originally thought that he could last for the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, but the duration of the forbidden art had been swiftly reduced. When the 18th breath arrived, his body shuddered, and the forbidden art completely disappeared. A feeling of weakness rose in his heart, and it turned into a broken smile at the corners of his lips. He had ignored the suppression of his cultivation base. Even though the suppression on his physical body was slightly lesser, it was still within the range of the suppression, especially since he was charging towards the sun-sinking talisman and executing the forbidden art. His body was already weak to begin with, and because of it, the suppression on him immediately increased by several fold. The forbidden art, which should have lasted for the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, turned into 18 breaths. Almost at the instant he slowed down, Su Ming took a step forward and appeared beside the clone. When he lifted his right hand, with a great force, he landed it on the clone's head. At the same time, Su Ming sent his will into the clone's body through his right hand. He was about to possess it for the second time. The fear of death stimulated the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. A powerful desire to live caused him to let out a shrill roar. At the instant Su Ming chose to possess him, his body jolted, and a crack appeared at the center of his brows. Immediately after, almost at the instant Su Ming's nascent divinity filled the clone's body, a small human crawled out of the crack at the center of his brows and fled madly. That small person was the independent will that had been born in the clone's body due to the heavenly incense rune. It could be said to be a soul, but it could also be said to be a nascent divinity. Once it flew out, its speed became much faster, and it rushed towards the sun-sinking talisman. The body that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole no longer had any form of consciousness or soul to Su Ming. It was just an empty body. His nascent divinity instantly fused into the body, but he soon retracted it. Once he put the body of the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole into his storage bag, Su Ming lifted his head and stared into the distance. He could now clearly see a gigantic, long runic symbol within the vast gray screen of light. At that moment, the soul of the clone was charging towards it. Without your soul, I won't be able to possess you, and I won't be able to possess you a second time. I wonder what will happen if I possess you a second time. I'm very curious. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. Besides wanting to turn the clone back into a clone, he had been so persistent in chasing after the clone because he wanted to know whether any changes would happen if he possessed the same clone a second time. With this thought in mind, there was no way he would allow the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole to escape just like that. With a cold harumph, Su Ming moved forward and chased after the clone's soul. The two of them were very close to the sun-sinking talisman, and as they chased after it, the soul of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole instantly arrived next to the sun-sinking talisman. Almost at the instant he arrived, his soul trembled and became blurry, as if it was under some kind of pressure and was about to dissipate. Su Ming also sensed an unprecedented limit on his level of cultivation. As he closed in, his level of cultivation continued weakening. From great completion in World Plane Realm, he fell to the later stage of World Plane Realm, then to the middle stage. When he reached the initial stage, his body sank, and from Heaven Cultivation Realm, he fell to Earth Cultivation Realm. This was a feeling he had not experienced for a long time. It was the same level of cultivation he had when he was relocated from the land of Berserkers to Divine Essence Star Ocean. Yet even so, with Su Ming's intelligence and the experiences he had gained over the years, not a single hint of change could be seen on his face. His speed might have become much slower, but he did not hesitate. In an instant, he caught up to the sun-sinking talisman. At the same time, booming sounds surged in the area. Almost at the same time, Su Ming closed in on the sun-sinking talisman. The white ring tumbled towards him. It had already shrunk to the point where it could envelop the sun-sinking talisman. Why must you be so ruthless? I've already given you my physical body. The clone's soul, whose body looked as if it was about to crumble, saw that the white ring had completely sealed off the area, and Su Ming was walking towards him. Terror and panic that had never appeared on his face before he spoke in a shrill voice. Your physical body? Su Ming smiled coldly. He did not say anything else to the soul of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. With a step forward, he charged towards the clone and lifted his right hand to seize it. With it, despair appeared on the clone's face. He was completely powerless to fight back. Even if Su Ming showed that he was only in Earth Cultivation Realm, he still could not struggle. In his despair, madness appeared on his face. At the instant Su Ming seized him, he closed his eyes and reopened them. The presence of self-destruction swiftly spread out from him. He knew that self-destruction was useless. He knew that Su Ming was skilled in reversing time. But if he did not self-destruct and just allowed himself to be killed, he would not be able to accept it. That was why even if he knew that it was useless, he still chose to self-destruct in a frenzy. Yet just as he knew, self-destruction was useless before Su Ming. A power that could reverse time blew past him. Su Ming seized the clone's soul with his right hand, and when he clenched his fist, he immediately placed layers of seals on him and put him into his storage bag. Once he left this place, his cultivation base would no longer be suppressed. Then, he would let the soul return to the clone's body and wait for Su Ming's second possession. Once he sealed the clone's soul, Su Ming lifted his head and cast a glance at the huge sun-sinking talisman in front of him. It shone with a gray light that reached 100,000 feet. There were 3 huge words on it, but Su Ming did not recognize them. When he drew them, they formed the entirety of the talisman. In fact, when Su Ming looked at it, he could sense a primitive, savage power contained within it. For some unknown reason, that ancient feeling made Su Ming remember the ancestral spirits worshipped by the alien races in Divine Essence Star Ocean. In fact, Su Ming could sense that the terrifying power contained within the talisman surpassed that of the White Ring. It was clearly a supreme treasure in Avacania realm. Su Ming did not stay for long. His level of cultivation had been suppressed to the point that his earth cultivation realm was on the verge of becoming unstable. He immediately turned around, intending to leave the place and return to the world outside to reunite with his senior brothers. But the instant he lifted his foot and was about to leave, the sun-sinking talisman shuddered. There's the presence of an offering. Activate All Spirits Hall. Offering an offering. You can enter All Spirits Hall. Offering an offering. You can enter All Spirits Hall. A buzzing sound came from the sun-sinking talisman and spread through the area. At the instant Su Ming's heart trembled, a great suction force suddenly spread out from the talisman. It enveloped Su Ming's body and yanked him with great force as if it wanted to drag him into the talisman. There is no offering. The master of offerings has offered himself. As the buzzing sounds rumbled, Su Ming's expression changed drastically. The suction force instantly increased exponentially. At the instant Su Ming was about to be dragged into the talisman, he lifted his right hand and pointed at the white ring. The ring immediately shrank with a howl and wrapped itself around Su Ming's right index finger before he yanked it outwards. Su Ming's body was immediately about to escape the area of the suction force. But at that moment, the sun-sinking talisman shone and the power of relocation was activated. Su Ming widened his eyes and a bitter smile appeared on his face. The light spread outwards, and even though it disappeared in an instant, Su Ming's body also disappeared without a trace once it disappeared, begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. It's almost time for the explosion to happen again this week. There will be 2 out of the last 3 days. Chapter 1286. At the instant Su Ming's body and the ring were relocated by the sun-sinking talisman, Su Ming's Akang clone, who was sweeping through the galaxy with nearly 100,000 cultivators in true Morning Dao world, and wherever he went, he would either send his soul to join Ninth Summit or be reduced to rivers of blood. The clone was charging through the galaxy when he came to an abrupt halt. He had long gray hair, and there was a blood-red light in his eyes that flickered between bright and dark. A grim and bloodthirsty air fused with madness, and the aura of death that was filled with the will of destruction contained a heinous malice. This was the clone that was similar to darkness formed after Su Ming's destructive personality fused with his Akang clone. The clone's face was filled with aloofness, and it was slightly different from Su Ming's. It was difficult for anyone to find Su Ming's presence on him, but he was Su Ming. The clone stopped in midair at that moment. The nearly 100,000 cultivators behind him were silent. No one dared to say a single word. All of them stared at Su Ming's dark Akang clone with respect. Sun-sinking talisman. A glint appeared in the eyes of Su Ming's dark Ikang clone, and a pensive look appeared on his face. He could sense that his real body had been relocated. At that moment, his connection with his real body had been severed, and he could not sense where his real body had gone. He could only vaguely sense that his real body was not in danger. But even though the connection had been severed and the two of them seemed to have turned into two unrelated people, the dark Ikang clone still acted according to Su Ming's will. He was Su Ming, and this was the Abyss Builder's inborn ability that no other methods could interfere with the Abyss Builder's possession besides the heavenly incense rune. After a moment of pensive silence, a red glare shone in the eyes of Su Ming's dark Ikang clone. He knew that he could not help his real body much, which was why he decided to ignore him. He could only follow his real body's will and create Ninth Summit in true Morning Tao world. I'll gather enough power of the fate of the world here. Then, when my real body returns, he will be able to replace true Morning Tao world. Resolve appeared in the eyes of Su Ming's dark Ikang clone. Without any hesitation, he charged forward. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, half a year went by. During it, most of the remaining cultivators in true Morning Tao world were like a huge rolling snowball that slowly grew larger under the joint efforts of eldest senior brother, second senior brother, Huzi, Su Ming's Ikang clone, and the hundreds of thousands of cultivators who had joined Ninth Summit. Huge stones gathered together from all directions and gathered at the spot where the Ninth Summit was built, turning into a gigantic continent. Tall mountains rose from the ground, and towers appeared in the blink of an eye. The outline of the Ninth Summit was gradually formed as time passed by. Another half a year passed. The gigantic Ninth Summit that surrounded the mountain gate was no longer in its embryonic form, but it also shown its extraordinary might. Nearly 500,000 cultivators were training there, and all of them had become disciples of the Ninth Summit through different methods. Some of them were willing, some of them were forced, and some of them were forced to become disciples of the Ninth Summit due to other reasons. There were various races among them. Some of them were originally from Morning Tao sect, and some of them were once from the Immortals Union. But now, Morning Tao sect and the Immortals Union were no longer around. All of them were disciples of the Ninth Summit. The 9 majestic mountains were the most prominent buildings in the Ninth Summit. They stood incredibly tall, and the mighty pressure spreading out from them enveloped the entire area, turning into layers of white ripples. As they spread out, they blocked the whirlwind from reaching them. Even though Su Ming's real body had disappeared, his Ikang clone was still around. Once the Ikang clone donned the black robe, besides his eldest senior brother and the others who knew that Su Ming had disappeared, no one else knew that the black-robed man, known as the malicious fiend in the Ninth Summit and the great sect elder of the Ninth Summit, was in truth just a clone. The first sect master of the Ninth Summit was second senior brother. Eldest senior brother did not want to do this, and Huzi could not be bothered to do it. Su Ming's Ikang clone did not care about his status, which was why the responsibility naturally fell on second senior brother's head. As for eldest senior brother, he was the same as Su Ming's Ikang clone. As a great sect elder, he was in charge of punishments. With his murderous aura, he could intimidate all disciples. Huzi had nothing to do, but as if he was used to fighting in the battlefield, he took up the responsibility of leading the Ninth Summit's disciples to continuously expand true Morning Tao world and continuously subjugate the remnant cultivators who had lost their foundation, be it true Morning Tao world or the Immortals Union. Among the 9 mountains in the Ninth Summit, the Ninth Summit was where the sect's main hall was located. Among the other mountains, Su Ming's Ikang clone was in the 4th. Once he handed over the matter of the war to Huzi, he isolated himself all year long to refine the power of the foreign fate he gathered together. The 3rd mountain belonged to Huzi, the 2nd was his second senior brother's chamber, and the 1st belonged to his eldest senior brother. Time passed. A total of 2 years had passed since Su Ming disappeared. During them, the Ninth Summit continued growing stronger. It also expanded its territory, turning into a gigantic existence in the galaxy. During those 2 years, the number of cultivators in the Ninth Summit increased from the previous 500,000 to nearly 800,000. This number might seem like a lot, but before the disaster caused by the whirlwind, there had been tens of millions of cultivators in true Morning Tao world. Right then, it could be said that there was less than a tenth of that number. However, this time, Huzi led the cultivators of the Ninth Summit to fight fiercely against another group of cultivators in the north, ending the Ninth Summit's continuous expansion. Su Ming's Arcane clone was also shocked by this matter, which was why he ended his isolation. Once he walked out, he personally headed to the galaxy in the north of true Morning Tao world. Once he fought against the people there in a battle of arts that shook the entire galaxy, he heavily injured their strongest, but he was also heavily injured. He returned to the Ninth Summit and isolated himself once more. Because of this, Huzi ended his campaign in the galaxy. Once he returned to the Ninth Summit, he immersed himself in Su Ming's initial request to break the relocation rune to enter Morning Tao sect. Even Huzi, who had absolute talent in runes, needed some time to break the rune. After all, it was a rune similar to a defense that had been in place for countless years in Morning Tao sect. Once it was shut from the inside, if it could be easily broken from the outside, then it would not live up to its name. However, Huzi was confident that if he was given a few more years, he would definitely be able to break the rune. However, through this matter, it could be seen that Su Ming's disappearance was due to him being the strongest person in the Ninth Summit. This was something that even his Arcane clone would not be Su Ming's opponent if he fought against him at full strength. This was something that his eldest senior brothers and the others acknowledged. It was precisely because of this that the Ninth Summit's expansion came to a halt. It stopped in the north, beyond the territory of a sect that had been established almost at the same time as the Ninth Summit 2 years ago. It was a sect called New Tao Sect. All the cultivators in it were former disciples of Morning Tao Sect. In fact, if anyone continued making inferences, they would be able to find out that they were an army sent by Morning Tao Sect to fight against the Immortals Union in the past. They might have suffered a blow during the disaster, but nearly 1 million cultivators had survived and formed the New Tao Sect. They were the ones who stopped the Ninth Summit's expansion. The strongest person in the sect was an almighty known as Tao Sect. His level of cultivation was mysterious and unfathomable, and he was also the one who had personally fought against Su Ming's Arcane clone. During that battle, he had even forced the Arcane clone to reveal his true form. But both of them were heavily injured, and both of them had to isolate themselves due to severe injuries. That was why even though the Ninth Summit had stopped expanding, New Tao Sect could not do anything to the Ninth Summit. Large-scale battles between them no longer occurred, but small-scale conflicts still frequently occurred. If the Ninth Summit and New Tao Sect were the only two forces of power left in true Morning Tao world, then the conflict between them would definitely become stronger until it reached the point where they would fight to the death. But in truth, this did not happen, because in the vast true Morning Tao world, he and the Tao Sect Master were not the only ones who had the same thought as Su Ming to create a sect in the past. That was why there was a third force of power near the south of Morning Tao Sect. It was a force of power known as South Union, which was formed by the remnants of the Immortals Union and numerous small races. They also had nearly 1 million cultivators, and there were many powerful warriors among them. In fact, in terms of overall power, they surpassed the Ninth Summit and Tao Sect, which did not have Su Ming. However, between South Union and the Ninth Summit was the gap that had been blasted open in arid triad expanse cosmos in the past. That was the region where the whirlwind was the strongest. When that region swept through, it indirectly blocked most of the cultivators of South Union. Even if they found a way to move in the whirlwind, it was still difficult for a large number of them to cross the area where the whirlwind was the strongest. If they went around it, they would not have the protective ripple that allowed them to exist for a long period of time in the whirlwind. If they failed, they would die, which was why they did not have too much conflict with the Ninth Summit and Tao Sect. Just like that, during the 2 years after Su Ming disappeared, the three great forces of power in true Morning Tao world slowly developed. As they kept each other in check, a rare balance was formed. However, this balance was incredibly fragile. With the slightest carelessness, it could be broken. Once it was broken, a fierce battle between the three great forces of power would erupt, and each of them would have their own trump cards. The Ninth Summit could not know the trump cards of South Union and New Tao Sect, just like how the other two forces of power did not know. Besides Su Ming's return, the Ninth Summit's trump card was also the destruction of Morning Tao Sect's relocation rune. Once the relocation rune was destroyed, the people from the Ninth Summit could enter Morning Tao Sect. Even if Morning Tao Sect had been reduced to ruins, the Ninth Summit could still become stronger. In fact, it could ignore all the whirlwind in the world outside and use the 100-something relocation spots to instantly appear in another place. Time passed, and the third and fourth years slowly went by. The conflict between the three forces of power gradually became more intense, to the point that it was about to go out of control. Chapter 12, 87. For years, the boundless vast expanse, the endless fog, the humidity around him, and the occasional sound of water dripping that came from the distance accompanied Su Ming for 4 years in this strange place. The fog in this place was divided into different colors. It would occasionally change, and at other times, it would intersect with each other. At this moment, within the purple mist, there was a figure staggering forward. The figure's footsteps were extremely slow, as if every single step he took would cause his body to suffer immense pain. It was only after a short while that figure was revealed from within the purple mist. He had a head full of white hair and a face full of wrinkles. He looked as if he had crawled out of a grave. Not a single ripple of power could be sensed from his frail body. He was just like a mortal. If it was not because of the determination in his eyes and the old face that allowed them to vaguely see Su Ming's face, no one would be able to imagine that this old man who looked as if he would fall from the slightest gust of wind was Su Ming, who had been relocated to this place 4 years ago. Su Ming panted harshly and slowly walked out of the fog. But at the instant he did so, a long arc charged out from the purple fog and charged towards him. It instantly shot through his body and brought with it a trail of blood that was almost black. When it fell on the ground, it let out sizzling sounds. What had shot through Su Ming's body was a flying fish. At the instant the flying fish shot through Su Ming's body, it was melted by the black blood he coughed up. Su Ming's feet trembled, and he fell to the ground, unmoving. Time trickled by. When the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn past, the purple fog started showing signs of changing color. When it slowly turned red, a figure suddenly flew out from within. It was a wild dog with flames spreading out from its entire body. The wild dog had 6 eyes, and all of them were sparkling at that moment. It was so quick that it instantly closed in on Su Ming, but it did not immediately approach him. Instead, it circled around him a few times, occasionally lifting its head to look at the changing color of the fog. When it saw that the fog was about to turn red, hesitation appeared in its 6 eyes, and it lowered its head swiftly to bite Su Ming's neck. Yet at the instant it opened its mouth to bite him, Su Ming lifted his right hand from his unmoving body, and he was so quick that he instantly threw a punch at the wild dog's gaping mouth. He grabbed its tongue, and in a clean and efficient manner, as if he had done this countless times during the past 4 years, he yanked the tongue out. At the same time, he stood up and rammed his body against the wild dog's body. As the dog let out a pained cry, Su Ming seized the wild dog's neck with his left hand and pushed it forward. At the instant the fog behind him turned from purple to red, Su Ming had already disappeared into the distance with the wild dog in tow. There was a black mountain about 10,000 lis away from this place. It was barren, and not a single plant could be found on it. In the heart of the mountain was a cave abode, and with a flash of light, Su Ming appeared outside the cave abode with the wild dog in his hand. Almost at the instant he appeared, not only did the fog in the distance turn completely red, an indescribable wave of heat instantly erupted from it. Wherever it went, the ground would immediately melt, and all existences would disappear. Su Ming could vaguely see a few wild dogs fleeing swiftly in the area, but in the blink of an eye, they were devoured by the wave of heat and turned into ashes. Without any hesitation, Su Ming stepped into the cave abode. At the instant he did so, the wave of heat charged towards him with a bang and crashed against the black mountain. A huge force rushed into the cave abode, and at the instant it touched Su Ming, he charged forward. Once he avoided it by a hair's breadth, he entered the depths of the cave abode in the mountain. A dark look appeared in his eyes. He turned his head around and cast a glance behind him. In silence, he lifted the dead wild dog, bit its neck, and drank a large mouthful of its blood. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth, and it was a faint golden color. As he drank the blood, the wrinkles on Su Ming's face slowly disappeared. His hair also gradually changed. When he swallowed all of the wild dog's blood, his appearance changed drastically. He was similar to how he was 4 years ago, but there was an indescribable, awe-inspiring air to him. That awe-inspiring pressure did not come from his expression, but from his blood and presence. He loosened his grip and flung the wild dog's carcass to the side. It landed on a pile of skeletons that was pushed high up in the cave abode. There were thousands of them, and they were densely packed together, giving them an incredibly ghastly sight. For years, this damn all-spirits hall, it trapped me for a total of 4 years. Su Ming wiped off the blood at the corners of his mouth and sat down cross-legged by the side. He stared at the sky beyond the tunnel. The color of the sky was red, and there was a wave of heat there that could instantly burn even him. That wave of heat surpassed that of the fifth kiln and all the destructive powers Su Ming had experienced previously. All Spirits Hall. This damn All Spirits Hall is one of the 3 great mysteries in Divine Essence Star Ocean. It's actually connected to the sun's sinking talisman. They're one entity. According to the legends of the tribes in Divine Essence Star Ocean, this is the place where all spirits originate from. It's the source where all antecedental spirits are born. Su Ming's expression was dark. He stared at the crimson sky beyond the cave abode, and everything he had experienced during the past 4 years appeared in his head. Ever since he was relocated to this place 4 years ago, he had been continuously searching for the exit. At the same time, he had run into the changes in the fog, faced the terrifying red light, and faced the wave of heat that could burn him. He had gone through a near-death experience in this place. He had also noticed that while his cultivation base had recovered, he could not replenish it in the slightest. Every single time he used up a bit of it, he would lose a bit of it forever. If he did not find the exit before he completely lost his cultivation base, there was a high possibility that he would die in this place. This made him not dare to use his enchanted treasures recklessly, especially the white ring. In this strange place where he could not recover his cultivation base once he used it, preserving his strength was Su Ming's best choice. Just as the scenes from the past 4 years appeared in Su Ming's mind, his pupils suddenly shrank, and his presence immediately disappeared. An aura of death surrounded Su Ming's body. He stared at the small patch of red sky he could see outside the cave abode. There were faint golden figures charging through it. He could tell that most of them were in human form, but there were also quite a number of them that looked like ferocious beasts. When they charged through the sky, they would let out piercing screeches that could make a person's soul ache in pain. Born in the world, beasts, that is why the world can last for a long time, because it does not give birth to itself. That is why it can live. If I want to live, I can only seize life. The ancestral spirits came before the ancestral spirits, and the ancestral spirits came before the disaster of the universe. That is why those who obtain life must destroy life. There were chaotic murmurs mixed in the piercing cries. Su Ming stared at the figures in the crimson sky and listened to the murmurs he did not understand. He clenched his right hand into a fist and did not move. He would never forget these figures. He had seen them for the first time on the 3rd month since he had come to this place. In the face of the strange existences that could ignore all divine abilities and cultivation bases, almost all of Su Ming's life force had been sucked away, and he had been forced to activate the supreme treasure, the ring. He had even spared no expense in using up his cultivation base to crush the creature. However, he did not expect that once he crushed one, thousands or even tens of thousands of such strange existences would charge out from a hall that had suddenly appeared in the crimson sky and launch a frenzied chase after Su Ming in this strange world. As he was continuously chased down, Su Ming's body became increasingly weaker. When his life force was about to be extinguished, the crimson sky disappeared, and the fog in the land turned white. At the instant it did so, all the strange creatures chasing after Su Ming disappeared without a trace. Everything returned to normal. There was red in Su Ming's eyes. He ended the scenes from the past 4 years in his mind and stared at the figures in the sky beyond the cave abode. After a long while, he turned his head around and cast his gaze on the ferocious beast skeletons. If he had not accidentally discovered that there were strange, ferocious beasts with flesh and blood in this place, and that eating their blood could help him recover his life force and his cultivation base recover slightly, it would have been very difficult for him to persevere. But the ferocious beasts in this place are incredibly cunning. Clearly, they have gained intelligence. If I want to kill them, I have to kill them in one strike, or else even if I kill them, I won't be able to replenish my energy. In silence, Su Ming lifted his right hand and touched the bloody mess on his chest. The blood there was black, and it was a type of poison formed after Su Ming had devoured the blood of a large number of ferocious beasts he had killed in this place. The poison had already spread through Su Ming's entire body, but if he did not devour it, then he would not be able to replenish his cultivation base and life force. This was a difficult choice. After thinking about it for a long time, Su Ming had chosen to devour it. His blood might have turned black, but as he drank the blood of ferocious beasts for 4 years, strange changes had also happened to his body, such as his chest. The wound that had been pierced through previously had completely healed without Su Ming using a single bit of his cultivation base. Time trickled by. The crimson red in the world outside lasted for a total of 7 days before it slowly disappeared and turned white. When the sky in the cave abode outside, Su Ming's eyes turned white. The aura of death on his body disappeared. Once it returned to normal, his expression turned dark. Over the past 4 years, I've walked through all the regions in the area. This is a world that seems to have no end. I didn't see any signs of cultivators in the areas around me. Perhaps the exit isn't on the ground, but in the palace that appeared in the sky all those years ago. Su Ming fell silent. He had come to this conclusion a long time ago, but he had been slightly hesitant. He turned his head around and cast his gaze on the area around the cave abode. The signs that had been excavated made it clear that this place was definitely not formed naturally. Su Ming had accidentally found this place. It had been like this when he came here. In silence, Su Ming cast his gaze in another direction of the cave abode. It was a corner near the stone wall. There was a black skeleton there. It belonged to a person. It was a cultivator, or perhaps more accurately speaking, the previous owner of the cave abode. Even if he was dead, there were still waves of mighty pressure coming from the skeleton. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, I'm going to explode in 2 days. Chapter 1288. All Spirits Hall is said to be the place where all ancestral spirits originated from. Su Ming's gaze landed on the skeleton, and he frowned. There was an ancient air to it, a telling sign that it had been there for an unknown number of years. All Spirits Hall was completely separated from the world outside. If it were not for the sun's sinking talisman, it would have been impossible for Su Ming to step into this place and be trapped there for 4 years. He stared at the skeleton, and the empty eyes on its head seemed to be staring back at him. There was a faint hint of mockery in those eyes. They were mocking Su Ming's futile attempt to leave this place, mocking Su Ming's future. Perhaps he would end up like him in this cave abode, waiting for his flesh and blood to disappear and turn into bones. The black bones might have been caused by the time it died, but there was also a possibility that it had devoured even more ferocious beast blood, just like Su Ming. Because of that, not only had its blood turned black, even its bones had turned black. Offering. Su Ming sighed softly. He still remembered the buzzing sound that echoed in the air when the sun's sinking talisman had been activated for some unknown reason 4 years ago, and sent him to this place. There was no offering, so the offering master offered himself. The offering master here should be me. Based on the situation at that time, I had unintentionally done something that fulfilled a certain requirement to activate the sun-sinking talisman over the course of countless years. However, my actions after that caused me to be unable to complete the activation of the sun-sinking talisman, which was why I was punished and sent here as an offering. In truth, Su Ming had already figured out this problem a few years ago. There is only one possibility for the so-called offering: the soul of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. Only a will that had been independent from the heavenly incense rune might have vaguely fulfilled the requirements for an offering and vaguely fit the description of the spirit in the All Spirits Hall. However, the clone soul had been taken away by Su Ming, which meant that once the sun-sinking talisman was activated, the offering was taken away and no longer offered, which is why everything that had happened after that had happened. Since these skeletons can appear here, and I can be teleported here, then even if this place hasn't been opened for a very, very long time, there must still be many skeletons like this here. It's even highly possible that there are still living people here. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. This was the answer he had been searching nonstop for 4 years. If he wanted to leave this place, he would have to search for the living. Even if he did not obtain the answer, he would be able to gain a better understanding of this so-called All Spirits Hall. After a moment of silence, Su Ming looked at the white sky outside the cave abode. He knew that the white fog outside would last for 7 days. After 7 days, the color of the fog would change, and as it changed, different dangers would appear until the red color would descend on the ground once again. This was like a cycle. He turned his head around once again and cast a glance at the cave abode. A determined look appeared on Su Ming's face. He had already stayed in the cave abode for several years, and he had only been circling the area, rushing back to avoid the strange existences in the red fog before the red fog descended. However, this was not a long-term plan. If he wanted to leave this place, he had to gain a better understanding of the world outside. At the very least, he had to know the origins of the figures in the red fog. At the very least, he had to step into the huge palace that had once appeared in the sky. Only then would he be able to find a way to leave this place. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. A glint appeared in his eyes, and immediately his skin started aging rapidly. His body slowly became ancient, and his hair turned white. An aura of death gradually filled his body. This was a method he had come up with over the past 4 years to minimize the loss of his cultivation base. He wanted to preserve his precious cultivation base so that it would not be wasted. Once he turned into an ancient old man, Su Ming got up and walked out of the cave abode. At the instant he did so, he cast his gaze across the area. White fog tumbled about on the ground, and the sky was enveloped by fog. It was a vast expanse of white that seemed to have no end. Not a single sound could be heard. This place was as quiet as a gigantic tomb. Su Ming quietly descended the mountain and ignored the white fog. He walked swiftly towards the east. He did not use his cultivation base and only used his feet to walk forward. His speed might not be able to compare to when he used his cultivation base to charge forward, but he was still much faster than a mortal. This was something that Su Ming had found incredibly difficult to adapt to when he had just entered the world of fog. His speed had also become much slower, and the feeling of weakness when he did not use his cultivation base was something that his body could not accept. However, as he devoured the blood of the ferocious beasts and his blood changed, his constitution also slowly changed. Su Ming did not know whether this change was good or bad, but there was no doubt that he needed this sort of change in this place. Su Ming was already incredibly familiar with his surroundings. He did not stop for even a single moment, and when the 4th day arrived, he stood at the top of a tall mountain in the east. When he turned his head around to look, even though his vision was covered by a vast amount of fog, he could still find the cave abode he had stayed in for several years. Because at that moment, he was located at the furthest place he had ever been to in the east during his search of the area. As he stared at the covered cave abode in the white fog, determination appeared on Su Ming's face. It was indeed much safer to hide there, but at the same time, it meant that he would be trapped there until he died. In the end, he would end up like the skeleton, and he would also end up as a skeleton. If he wanted to leave this accursed all-spirits hall, then he had to leave the safe cave abode. The world outside might be filled with danger, but at the same time, there was also a chance for him to leave this place. This kind of decision was not easy to make. After all, if any living being found a safe place in a dangerous environment, if they were to leave, they would be placed in danger again. This was a kind of human nature, a kind of instinctive rejection as a living being. Most of the lives would choose to stay in a safe place. Even if they knew that there would be no results and that they would still die in the end, it was still better to die later than to die earlier. Su Ming had only become certain of this belief after remaining silent for several years. At that moment, he cast a deep glance at the place, then turned his head around and charged towards the fog beneath the mountain he had been to the furthest mountain. He stepped into a place he had never gone to during the 4 years he had been in this place. The fog obscured his vision, and he could not see even a few inches in front of him. Every single time he spread out his divine sense, it meant that he would have to use up his cultivation base, which was why Su Ming rarely used his divine sense to cover the area. Besides using up his cultivation base, he would also bring unnecessary trouble to himself. This was a lesson Su Ming had learned over the past 4 years. The main reason he had been chased by the living beings in the red fog in the past was because his divine sense had attracted the first figure in the red fog. All the lives in this place seemed to be incredibly sensitive to divine senses. If he used even the slightest bit of divine sense, they would instantly notice it. That was why, unless it was absolutely necessary, Su Ming would not use the power of his divine sense. However, in the white fog, in the white light, which was the safest of all fog, Su Ming still tried to sweep his divine sense through the area. His divine sense would be weakened and limited in the fog, which was why even if he used his full strength, he would not be able to travel too far. He only needed to brand the terrain around him in his mind, so that even if he could not see his surroundings, he would not get lost. Days passed by. Su Ming continued moving forward. He did not have time to rest, and after 7 days, when the fog around him gradually turned from white to blue, he had already traveled far into the distance. When he saw blue in the white fog, Su Ming clearly relaxed a little. His constantly vigilant heart also relaxed, and he sat down cross-legged to rest for a while. Su Ming had been in this place for 4 years, but he still could not find the pattern of the fog. He only knew that white would definitely come after red, but he could not tell what would come after white. It might be blue, or it might be green, or it might even be purple. In fact, there was even a possibility that it would still be red. That was why 7 days was his limit. It was also a gamble. That was why the furthest Su Ming had traveled in the past was definitely not more than 4 days. He would leave enough time for himself to return to his cave abode, unless he went out to hunt. Caution and caution. This was the constant vigilance in Su Ming's heart after living in this place for 4 years. Even if the white fog had turned blue, Su Ming only relaxed for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn before he immediately became alert again. He looked around warily and slowly walked forward, because besides the white and red fog, which would definitely last for 7 days, the other colors of fog would only last for an indeterminate amount of time. It might last for 1 day, or it might last for 7 days. In fact, it might even last for half a day or 2 hours. Su Ming had seen all of them before. In the midst of his wariness, Su Ming continued running forward without any hesitation. With the full speed he could muster, he left into the distance. It's a pity that I can't take away the clone that practices the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, or else I would be much faster. Su Ming sighed in his heart. During the 4 years, he had tried multiple times to bring out the clone and the clone's soul from his storage bag in an attempt to possess and fuse with them. But every single time he opened his storage bag and the clone appeared, even the relatively safe white fog in the world outside would instantly turn red, and a large number of figures would appear in an instant. There was simply no time for Su Ming to possess the clone. If he persisted, then his body would be submerged in the red fog. The blue fog lasted for 3 days before it turned orange, but when it lasted for 5 days, when Su Ming had already traveled for half a month, the orange fog turned purple. The instant the purple fog appeared, an even greater wariness appeared on Su Ming's face. That purple fog was the fog he used to hunt during the past 4 years. The ferocious beasts that could recover their cultivation bases after devouring others would only appear when the purple fog appeared. What made Su Ming wary was not just these ferocious beasts, but also a certain pattern he had concluded after observing them countless times over the past 4 years. After purple, there would definitely be red, begging for monthly votes. Chapter 1289. Boom! In the purple fog, Su Ming seized a ferocious beast that looked like a tiger with his right hand. That ferocious beast looked like a tiger, but there was a single horn on its forehead. At that moment, Su Ming seized its neck and pressed it down on the ground. Veins popped up on Su Ming's right hand, and the power of his cultivation base reverberated between his fingers. His face was old, and he swept his gaze across the area with a calm expression. He squeezed his right hand, and with a loud crack, he crushed the tiger's neck. Then, he lowered his head and bit down on the ferocious beast's neck. He sucked in a deep breath, and a large amount of faint golden blood flowed into his mouth. Even if the tiger's neck had been crushed, it continued struggling, but with Su Ming's right hand pressing down on it, no matter how much it struggled, it was useless. As Su Ming continued eating, it gradually stopped moving. After a moment, when Su Ming lifted his head, the corners of his mouth were covered in blood. If anyone saw him at that moment, they would definitely be shocked, and their hearts would tremble because at that moment, Su Ming looked incredibly terrifying and ferocious. Even if his Akang clone was not around, he still exuded a malicious aura. Su Ming wiped off the blood at the corners of his mouth and let go of the ferocious beast's neck. He stood up, and with a single move, he charged into the distance. This time, he no longer moved with his physical body, but had activated his cultivation base. If this was a normal hunt, Su Ming would not have done this, but he was in the world outside. He did not know when the purple fog would turn red, so he had to charge forward. This was also part of his plan. Only when the purple fog appeared and the ferocious beast served as supplements would he be able to use his cultivation base without having to be slightly more wary. Su Ming was so quick that he instantly left into the distance. After a moment, a ferocious beast that looked like a python was seized by Su Ming's left hand. No matter how the python coiled around his body and tightened its grip, Su Ming did not slow down. As he charged forward, he bit down on the python's body and drank a large mouthful of its blood. After a moment, he let go and simply allowed the python's body to slide down before he charged forward even faster. Time trickled by. When the first day of the purple fog passed, Su Ming came to an abrupt halt. He let go of a wild dog whose blood he had completely devoured, and a dark red glare shone in his eyes. This was another mark he had left behind after continuously devouring the blood of the ferocious beasts in this place for 4 years. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and he turned his head to the side to look at the fog to his right. His divine sense had appeared and disappeared just as quickly. During that instant, he noticed that there was a small hill in the fog to his right. That hill was hollow, and there were faint ripples of a rune within it. He only hesitated for the span of a few breaths before he immediately changed his direction and charged towards the small hill. He was so quick that he activated his cultivation base, and before long, he arrived near the small hill. When he looked over, his pupils shrank. This was a small white hill. Even though there was a hint of purple in the purple fog, Su Ming could still tell that it was white. The mountain was indeed hollow, and there were indeed ripples of a rune within it, but those ripples were broken. With a single move, Su Ming appeared at the top of the mountain. He saw a gigantic hole at the top of the mountain, and within it was a cave abode. The cave abode was in ruins, and there was dust everywhere. In fact, some of the purple fog had seeped into the cave and filled the area. Su Ming stepped into the cave abode, and with just one glance, he saw 2 skeletons pinned to the stone wall of the cave abode by the side. One of them was big, and the other small. Su Ming could tell that the big skeleton belonged to a man, and the small skeleton clearly belonged to a child about 5 or 6 years old. Their bodies were twisted, a telling sign that they had suffered great pain before they died. This sort of twisting made Su Ming remember the pain he had felt when almost all his life force had been sucked away by the figure in the red fog. They were pinned to the stone wall, and there were 2 red bone spears impaling their bodies. They had pierced through their skulls, and no one knew how long they had been pinned there. There were quite a lot of shattered stones on the ground around them. Su Ming stood there and looked at the 2 skeletons quietly, then at the 2 bone spears that were still exuding waves of murderous, chilling presence. He lifted his head in silence and looked at the gigantic hole above him in the cave abode. Naturally, an image appeared in his mind. In that image, these 2 people, one big and one small, who were not skeletons, were living here, avoiding the dangers of the outside world. However, one day, perhaps when the fog outside turned red, their cave abode was blasted open by someone from the outside, shattered stones fell, and 2 bone spears descended along with them. They pinned a pair of people who might have been father and son to the stone wall, and they could only let out shrill screams as a group of figures in the red fog pounced on them and sucked away all of their life force. Su Ming stared at the hole quietly, and his wariness grew stronger. A fierce glare appeared in his eyes. While he was in the cave abode, he knew that besides the figures in the red fog, there was another dangerous existence in this world that could throw bone spears. Just what happened in this world? In silence, Su Ming left the cave abode. Even though he did not know when the purple fog outside would turn red, the cave abode was already damaged. With the hole around, it was impossible for him to use it to hide. That was why before the fog turned red, Su Ming had to quickly search for a place of refuge. As time passed, the purple fog tumbled about even more violently. As Su Ming charged forward, a dark look appeared in his eyes. His experiences during the past 4 years told him that when the purple fog tumbled about at its strongest, a period of relative calmness would usually appear, and during that calmness, the red fog would descend. Even though this was not absolute, it would still happen 6 out of 10 times. The second day, the third day, and when the 4th day arrived, the purple fog around Su Ming tumbled about with loud bangs like raging waves. This was the moment when it was at its strongest, but Su Ming still did not manage to find another place of refuge. In silence, Su Ming did not give up. He continued charging forward. When the 5th day arrived, the fog suddenly calmed down, and Su Ming came to a halt. He let out a soft sigh and also threw out the bloodless carcass of a ferocious beast in his hand. I can only use this method. It might be slightly dangerous, but since I chose to walk out of the safe cave abode in the beginning, then I must have been prepared to face danger. Su Ming shook his head. In the calm purple fog, he lifted his right foot and stomped on the ground. With a bang, cracks appeared on the ground. Su Ming lifted his right hand and punched the ground. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and a deep pit appeared on the ground. At the same time, Su Ming swung his right hand, and the pit immediately sank. When it reached a great distance underground, Su Ming sensed a powerful repelling force spreading out from the ground. If he continued going down, then his power would not be enough. He knew that this was his limit, which was why he sat down cross-legged and formed a seal with his hands before he pushed them around him. Immediately, the earth above him gathered together, and in the span of a few breaths, the ground turned flat, burying Su Ming within it. About 2 hours after Su Ming hid himself underground, the color of the purple fog in the world outside suddenly started changing rapidly. In an instant, it turned red. At the same time, the entire sky was filled with red, causing the entire world to be dyed in a shade of red that seemed to have no end. At the same time, shrill, piercing cries echoed in the air. Figures walked out as if they had been born from the red fog. They floated in the red fog and devoured all the life force they saw. At the same time, murmurs reverberated throughout heaven and earth. Life is born in the world, and when it is born, it is an animal, That is why the world can last for so long, because it does not give birth to itself. That is why it can live. If I want to live, I can only seize life. Ancestral spirits come before ancestral spirits, and they come before the disaster of the universe. That is why those who obtain life must destroy life. The piercing voice seemed to contain some sort of strange power. Even if Su Ming was hidden deep underground, he could still hear it. He made his presence disappear and filled his body with the aura of death so that he could hide from the red fog in the world outside. This was the method Su Ming had used when he was chased down by the figures in the red fog. But he knew that this method could only be effective temporarily. It could not last for long. During the 7 days of the red fog, the longest he had lasted was the 4th day before he was found by the figures in the red fog. 4 days. If I can last for 4 days, it'll be fine. If I can last for 1 more day, they'll be able to chase after me for 1 less day. Su Ming forced himself to calm down and quietly count the time. Days passed. The 2nd day, the 2nd day, the 4th day. As Su Ming waited quietly and remained vigilant, the 5th day passed, but when the 6th day arrived, Su Ming suddenly jolted, and a fierce glare shone in his eyes. Without any hesitation, he lifted his right hand and punched the ground above him. As booming sounds surged into the sky, the ground trembled, and Su Ming rushed out. At the instant he rushed out, more than a dozen red figures pounced on him from the depths of the ground where he had previously been buried. If Su Ming had not noticed them quickly, then all his life force would have been instantly sucked away. There's still 2 more days. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Once he rushed out of the ground, he immediately charged forward in the red fog. He did not choose to hide in the depths of the ground. He had tried it before, and the experience he gained after paying a certain price was that he could only hide in the ground once in the red fog. If he tried it a 2nd time, then it would be completely useless. At that moment, as he charged forward in the fog, the piercing sounds behind him became even stronger. Figures appeared one after another and pounced on him in a frenzy. It would have been fine if there were only these figures behind him, but in less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, a large number of red figures appeared by his sides, and even in front of him. Su Ming gritted his teeth and leaped up. With the power of flight, he charged into the distance. A large number of red figures also appeared above him. Once they saw him, they immediately screamed and chased after him. Second update, please get monthly votes. Chapter 1290. Whoosh. The appearance of the voice caused Su Ming's expression to change. When he formed a seal with his right hand, the power of Fate Realm appeared around him and turned into layers of seals. At the instant they appeared, they crumbled layer by layer. Su Ming jolted. He opened his mouth, but could not cough up even a single drop of blood. However, his presence had clearly become slightly weaker. The whooshing sound came from all the red figures around Su Ming taking a breath at the same time. With it, quite a large amount of Su Ming's life force was sucked away. Even though they did not come into direct contact with him, and even though the absorption of his life force through the air was not much to each red figure, there were already nearly 100 of them. Because of that, the loss of his life force was just as terrifying to Su Ming. If it was not because he had enough experience and had immediately executed the seals on the laws of fate the moment he heard the voice, 2/10 of his life force would have been immediately sucked away. Damn it! Su Ming's expression turned dark. He became even faster. At that moment, he could no longer be bothered with the loss of his cultivation base. The power he gathered together and erupted at that instant was the greatest manifestation of its power. Su Ming had tested the red figures before. They did not care about any sort of divine ability or attack. All arts were as if they were invisible to him. In fact, physical damage was completely useless against them. Even enchanted treasures were the same. Only Su Ming's white ring could kill them. But Su Ming had experienced the price of killing them in the past. If he had not been forced into a corner, he would not have wanted to do it. Yet, as Su Ming charged forward, the number of red figures around him increased. Their numbers had already increased from nearly 100 to nearly 6/10. In fact, they did not even need to catch up to Su Ming. They only needed to breathe a few more times, and they would be able to turn him into a dried corpse. He would lose all his life force and die. Whoosh! When the voice appeared again, killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had always been an arrogant person, a murderous and maddening person who had a monstrous, murderous aura. He had been suppressed in this strange world for 4 years, and he was filled with ruthlessness. The change in his blood had also caused powerful killing intent to frequently appear in Su Ming's mind. At that moment, when he was forced back by the red figures, Su Ming decided to throw his head back and roar. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the sky. Immediately, the white ring on his index finger absorbed a large amount of Su Ming's cultivation base. With a bang, a powerful ripple erupted from it. The moment the white ripple appeared, it spread outwards and immediately caused the red fog to disappear layer by layer, as if it was melting. The 100-something red figures also let out shrill screams of pain the moment they breathed a second time. All those who were touched by the spreading ripple were immediately destroyed in their bodies and souls. In the blink of an eye, all the red figures around Su Ming disappeared. However, Su Ming did not relax in the slightest. Using the white ring this time had used up quite a large amount of his cultivation base. With a single move, he charged into the distance at full speed. He knew that there were countless red figures in this place, and there was no way he could kill all of them. In the past, when he killed one of them, they would chase after him in a frenzy. Now that he had killed 100-something of them, the consequences would be incredibly severe. Almost at the instant Su Ming charged into the distance, countless red figures were originally drifting about in the endless red fog in the strange world, but in an instant, they stopped moving. They turned their heads around swiftly and looked in Su Ming's direction. They let out piercing roars, and their bodies instantly disappeared. As if cultivators had warped, they appeared around Su Ming. In just the span of a few breaths, nearly 1,000 red figures filled the world, causing Su Ming's skin to crawl. But that was not all. At that moment, booming sounds reverberated in the sky, and a towering, majestic hall manifested in the air. A vast, mighty pressure instantly descended on the ground. This was the second time Su Ming saw the hall, and this time he looked at it even more closely. He saw that while the hall was majestic, there were quite a lot of damage and cracks on it, as if it was not complete. At the same time, countless red figures flew out from within the hall. All of them looked as if they were dressed in red robes. There were thousands of them, and their piercing roars reverberated in the air, causing the fog to tumble and the ground to tremble. They rushed out together and charged towards Su Ming. Su Ming forced down the urge to use the power of the white ring again. As he charged forward, he used the advantage he gained from widening the distance between them and himself to charge forward with gritted teeth. The thousands of red figures chased after him. Their piercing cries reverberated in the air and shook Su Ming's heart. There were still more red figures appearing in the hall in the sky. In fact, there were even more people warping around Su Ming. In the blink of an eye, thousands of red existences appeared. They surrounded Su Ming and surrounded him. Before they even closed in, the sounds of their breathing could already be heard. Those whooshing sounds shook the sky and earth and were deafening to the ears. This was a power that could instantly suck Su Ming dry in one go and make him lose all his life force in an instant. A ferocious look appeared on Su Ming's face. He had been waiting for more red figures to appear. At the instant they breathed, he lifted his right hand again. At that moment, he could no longer care about the depletion of his cultivation base. He surged it into the white ring, and with a low growl, an even stronger ripple erupted from the ring. That ripple hummed and spread out with loud bangs, stirring up an invisible wave of sound that disintegrated all the fog within a circular area of 1 million feet. As it spread out, the near 10,000 red figures around Su Ming screamed in pain before their bodies and souls were destroyed. In fact, even the hall in the sky shuddered at that moment, but it withstood the power of the ripple. At the instant all the fog in the 1 million feet area disappeared, A mountain that had previously been submerged in fog was revealed in the distance. That mountain was also white. Su Ming shuddered and coughed up a mouthful of black blood. Without any hesitation, he charged towards the mountain. The mountain had been hidden in the fog previously, but at the instant it was revealed, Su Ming immediately noticed that there was an empty space in the mountain, as if there was a cave abode there. Su Ming also knew that if hundreds of red figures died, thousands would be lured over, and if thousands of them died, then tens of thousands would definitely be lured over. With his current level of cultivation, he could only make the ripple from the ring explode in a large area one more time. After that, even if the red figures stopped chasing after him, Su Ming would lose all his cultivation base and become immortal. Since he would not have any power left in him, he would lose the right to hunt. In a flash, Su Ming rushed out of the area of 1,000,000 feet and charged towards the red fog in the distance. At that moment, an enraged roar came from the hall in the sky. As it did so, an innumerable amount of red figures walked out of thin air in the sky. They did not number in the hundreds or thousands, but in an instant, tens of thousands of them appeared. They were packed densely together, and it was enough to make all those who saw them feel incredibly shocked. If that was all there was to it, then it wouldn't be a big deal. Rumbling sounds echoed in the sky as a tall figure walked out of the palace. This figure was 3 to 5 feet tall, and his body was like a mummy. His eyes were red, and he held a red-boned spear in his hand. There was not just one of these figures, but 3 in a row. A terrifying wave of power erupted from each of their bodies, and even their presences were moving towards an ethereal state, as if they did not have souls. In fact, when Su Ming swept his gaze past them, he saw a scene that caused his pupils to shrink. He saw that the 3 mummies were not originally 30 to 50 feet tall, but there were multiple shriveled heads and degenerated limbs on their bodies. Clearly, these were terrifying existences that had been formed by multiple corpses gathered together by some unknown method. Their appearance made Su Ming's heart let out a loud thump. The tens of thousands of red figures roared and charged towards Su Ming. The 3 mummies let out a furious roar, and as they took a step forward, ripples appeared under their feet. In an instant, they too charged towards Su Ming. The hall in the sky was still buzzing, as if more figures were about to appear soon. The white mountain before Su Ming might have been shrouded by fog once again, but it was already very close to him. The instant the 3 mummies closed in and the tens of thousands of red figures charged towards him with piercing whistles, Su Ming charged forward at full speed and appeared on the mountain in an instant. He scanned the area with his divine sense and immediately found a cave in the middle of the mountain. He immediately charged towards it. Almost the instant Su Ming closed in on the cave, the 3 mummies in the sky roared together and lifted their right hands. The bone spear turned into a red bolt of lightning, and with a presence that seemed as if it wanted to tear apart the world, it charged towards Su Ming, who was in the White Mountain. With a bang, Su Ming stepped into the cave. Immediately, he was pushed back by the impact formed by the bone spear stabbing into the mountain. However, a protective light immediately appeared on his body. When he fought against it, Su Ming coughed up blood. Once he rushed forward, he turned around swiftly. A ruthless look appeared on his face, and he was prepared to fight against the 3 mummies in the cave. However, at that moment, an old voice suddenly shot out from the mountain. That voice was filled with a domineering air. It was a will that looked down on the heavens and looked down upon all lives in the world. When spread out, it caused the red sky to tremble, the tens of thousands of red figures to shriek and retreat, and the 3 mummified corpses to tumble back like kites. Get lost, you bunch of broken lives who failed in the ascension of your spirits. Get out of Heavenly Spirit Tribe's territory. Go back to your spirit dissension hall. Get lost. As the voice boomed, it stirred up thunder in the world, causing the red fog in the area to tumble about. Countless bolts of lightning descended from the sky, causing the red figure screams to become even louder. The red light in the 3 mummies' eyes became duller, and they swiftly retreated. I'm asking for monthly votes for the 3rd chapter tomorrow. Chapter 1291. Within the span of 3 breaths, all of you incomplete life forms who have failed in spirit ascension, get lost. If anyone dares to disobey me, I will slaughter my way to Spirit Dissension Hall and destroy your memorial tablets. I will destroy all your spirit bodies. The ancient voice contained a supreme, domineering air. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, not only did the red figures in the area scream and retreat, even the red fog in the area tumbled about, as if it was shuddering and tumbling backwards layer by layer. In just the span of 2 breaths, not a single red figure could be seen within a circular area of 1,000,000 feet. Even the hall and the sky had disappeared without a trace. Everything returned to normal. Even the red fog in the distance seemed to gradually turn white, as if it was about to turn into white fog ahead of time. Su Ming stood at the entrance of the cave. His eyes sparkled rapidly at everything that had happened. A hint of shock as well as uncertainty appeared on his face. He stood still, and the old man's voice still echoed in his ears. Su Ming did not move. The area soon sank into dead silence. Not a single sound could be heard. It was as if Su Ming's existence did not attract the slightest bit of attention from the person who had called himself Heavenly Spirit Tribe. Failed in Spirit Ascension. Spirit Dissension Hall. Heavenly Spirit Tribe. After a moment, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He turned his head around and cast a glance at the depths of the cave. After a moment of pensive silence, he did not step in. Instead, he walked out of the cave and stood at the middle of the White Mountain. Su Ming stared into the distance. He could clearly see the fog in the distance changing rapidly. White had already occupied a small portion of it. Before long, the red fog in the world would disappear and be replaced by white, and 7 days of relative safety would be welcomed. These red figures and the mummy with the bone spear. So they're the products of failed spirit ascension. Then since there are failed spirit ascensions, there must definitely be people who succeeded in spirit ascension. Spirit ascension? Could it be that the so-called ancestral spirits or antecedent spirits were born after successful spirit ascension? Su Ming's eyes sparkled. The words you families you row had once told him when he was in Divine Essence, Star Ocean's black ink planet appeared in his head. Legend has it that when the sky and earth, the universe and the universe, the stars and the sky were still in a state of chaos, the first batch of living beings were known as ancestral spirits. The ancestor spirits created life, which was why there were thousands of races and all living beings. All living beings worshipped the ancestor spirits. Over the endless years, among the living beings who worshipped the ancestor spirits, some living beings who could bear the power of the ancestor spirits slowly appeared. They were known as the antecedent spirits, an unknown calamity. All spirits fell into a deep slumber, regardless of whether it was the ancestral spirits or the antecedent spirits that had become spirits because of their faith. None of them could avoid this calamity. As the calamity continued, the 10,000 races also withered. They either scattered in all directions or went extinct until they fell into decline. In the endless years after the catastrophe, there were no ancestral spirits or antecedent spirits. However, people looked at the changes in the heavens, looked at the stars in the world, felt the laws and rules, and then combined them with some of the cultivation arts that were left behind in the years, slowly creating a new system. It was a type of cultivation system that allowed one's body to become more complete and stronger. Throughout the ages, the most outstanding cultivators of such a cultivation system were known as successor spirits. By then, successor spirits were incredibly rare. Due to the countless races spreading out and multiplying, the people who practiced the cultivation system were known as cultivators. Based on the ancient titles, they were in truth cultivators known as succeeding spirits. This was the explanation Yuro had given Su Ming in the past. It was also the first time Su Ming learned of the meaning behind the titles of ancestral spirit, antecedent spirit, succeeding spirit, and succeeding spirit. Su Ming had been touched when he heard this before, but he did not pay too much attention to it. He believed that this was just another understanding of cultivators among the tribes in divine essence Star Ocean. It was not complete, and it was one-sided. However, when Su Ming met the predecessor of Tao Ocean in true Morning Tao world, he saw the red figure and the All Spirits Hall, the legendary place in divine essence Star Ocean where all living beings were born. He noticed a few important terms in the old man's words, and his heart was suddenly stirred up. Based on what the people in divine essence Star Ocean say, cultivators are in truth succeeding spirits. After all, divine essence Star Ocean is part of arid triad expanse cosmos. Is it possible that arid triad expanse cosmos has already gone through 4 eras, just like Sui Chen Z, Ikang, and Old Man Extermination? They were just existences from one of the eras, or outsiders. Of the 4 eras, besides the current era of the succeeding spirit, the other 3 eras have already been buried in the long river of history. Only a tiny bit of information has been passed down, but due to the fact that divine essence Star Ocean is ancient and has always maintained the ways of tribes, it has a relatively complete set of information regarding the 4 eras. Su Ming fell silent. A contemplative look appeared in his eyes, and the more he thought about it, the more shocked he became, because he suddenly thought of another problem. The Almighties in arid triad expanse cosmos and the cultivators in Saint Defire's camp were clearly of the same realm. They should have been evenly matched, but when they fought against each other, a cultivator in Solar Culpa realm from Saint Defire expanse cosmos could win against a cultivator in Fate realm from arid triad expanse cosmos. In fact, he even dared to fight against a cultivator in Life realm. Just what sort of difference existed in this for them to be so out of sync? Su Ming had always been puzzled about this. He had once believed that arid triad expanse cosmos was rather primitive, which was why it could not compare to the cultivation system that Saint Defire's camp had formed over countless years. In fact, Su Ming had once been slightly envious of the core of Saint Defire expanse cosmos cultivation system. Origin. Saint Defire cultivated Origin, while Dark Dawn cultivated Spirit Core. When Su Ming learned of this, he had sighed in his heart. He did not know what arid triad cultivated, and he had no clue about it. In his confusion, he had once wanted to learn from Saint Defire expanse cosmos and cultivate the so-called power of Origin. In truth, he had indeed taken a few steps in this area, but he could never forget the casual tone in the predecessor of Tao Ocean's words when it analyzed Origin during the trial for the Dynas in true Morning Tao world. While its tone might have been normal, Su Ming could still hear the indifference in its words. It was as if Origin was very simple to the predecessor of Tao Ocean. There was nothing complicated about it. It was so simple that it only needed to ponder over it for a moment before it could help Su Ming sense the existence of Origin of Tremors. That Origin was not mysterious. It was just some simple principles. As long as a person understood them and understood them thoroughly, they would be able to cast them. Su Ming's breathing quickened slightly, and a brilliant light shone in his eyes. These were questions and doubts that had always existed in his heart. At that moment, once the old voice mentioned a few important words, these words were like a key that instantly allowed Su Ming to think of many things, and they turned into a wild guess in his head, one that Su Ming still believed somewhat in, even though it was a wild guess. It's not that the cultivators in arid triad expanse cosmos aren't strong, but that the cultivators in arid triad expanse cosmos are now the cultivators of the 4th era. They have already lost the cultivation system of the past, and it can be said that they have evolved it again. Saint Defire expanse cosmos might have gone through several eras as well, but there is no doubt that even if they were once cultivators, their cultivation system is still more complete than arid triads, which is why there is such a difference between them. The 4th era is the era of the succeeding spirits. Then I can deduce that the 3rd era is the era of the succeeding spirits. The succeeding spirits watch the changes in the universe, the stars in the world, and sense the laws and rules. Then, by combining them with the cultivation arts left in the past, they slowly create a new cultivation system. It is a cultivation system that allows the body to reach perfection and increase its state of being. In the 3rd era, The people who practice this cultivation system are known as the succeeding spirits. In that era, there was Sui Chun Zi, Ikang, and Old Man Extermination. During the glory of that era, they should have been able to fight against Saint Defire and Dark Dawn. Even if their overall strength was still lacking, they should have been evenly matched in terms of their cultivation bases and combat abilities. But the destruction of the Third Era, the deaths of Sui Chun Zi and the others, and Ikang's slumber caused the cultivators of the Fourth Era to become even weaker because they only practiced the incomplete cultivation methods from the Third Era. That is why, while their realms were very high, their combat abilities could not compare to the cultivators from Saint Defire's camp. And the destruction of the Third Era might have been because of Old Man Extermination's ballad. Su Ming's heart trembled. He had a vague feeling that even if his guess was not entirely accurate, he was definitely close to the truth. His breathing quickened. If he continued making deductions, he would find that the Second Era was the era of antecedental spirits. It was a completely different era from the Third Era, and even their cultivation methods were completely different. The cultivators of the Second Era worshipped the ancestral spirits of the First Era, and from there, they obtained incredibly powerful and overwhelming power. They slowly stood out among their tribes, and they were known as antecedental spirits. In the era when the ancestral spirits died, they led their tribes and launched a glorious war. But in the end, they still faced the fall and destruction of their era. That destruction drowned out everything they had. Antecedental spirits. Antecedental spirits. There's a high possibility that the predecessor of Tao Ocean is an antecedental spirit from the Second Era, but it's still alive. A brilliant light that had never appeared before shone in Su Ming's eyes. He felt that the more he analyzed the situation, the closer he was to the truth. That's why the predecessor of Tao Ocean could research the cultivators of Saint Defire Expanse Cosmos and the ancient god at will. In fact, it could imitate all sorts of divine abilities that would erupt from them in the illusion even after they died. It could even imitate the essence of Saint Defire Expanse Cosmos core cultivation system. From this, it's enough to tell just how strong the antecedental spirits of the Second Era were. Then, there's a perfect explanation for the function of All Spirits Hall and the failure of spirit ascension mentioned by the Ancient Old Man. All Spirits Hall contains a legacy that allows the people of the Second Era to become antecedental spirits. Su Ming shuddered. He was shocked by his own guess, and at the same time, a powerful desire suddenly erupted from the depths of his heart. I've sent the first update, and I'll continue asking for monthly votes. Chapter 1292. That's why the previous Spirit Ascension failed. This also means that the possibility of the Spirit Ascension failing is incredibly high. Once it fails, it will turn into the red figures that have no consciousness. As Su Ming's heart trembled, he remembered the red figures murmuring after they appeared. Born in the world, but born in the world, animals, that is why the world can last for so long, because it does not give birth to itself. That is why it can live. If I want to live, I can only seize life. Ancestral spirits come before ancestral spirits, and they are before the disaster of the universe. That is why those who obtain life must destroy life. That must be it. A powerful light shone in Su Ming's eyes. His breathing quickened. When he lifted his head, he stared at the sky, which had already turned white. He stared at the spot where the hall had appeared, and a determined look of desire appeared in his eyes. Offerings, offerings. The heavenly incense rune should also be an item from the Second Era, which is why the soul of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole naturally possesses a certain characteristic. It can be turned into an offering, and with it, I can activate the All Spirits Hall in exchange for a chance to have my spirit ascend. This is... Su Ming forced down the desire in his heart. He suddenly remembered the Old Man Extermination. In the past, the Old Man Extermination had recited the ballad so that all lives could send him offerings. By the looks of it, the Old Man Extermination is imitating the All Spirits Hall from the Second Era, or rather, he's trying to mislead us. There's also another possibility, that he knows the secret of the All Spirits Hall and wants to become an antecedental spirit. But he lacks offerings, which is why he used the ballad as bait to gather the power of the entire expanse cosmos to search for offerings for him. This plan can make him destroy the Third Era, and it can also give him the right to step into the All Spirits Hall. In silence, Su Ming did not know whether his guess about the old man extermination was correct, but regardless of whether it was correct or not, it was not the main point. The main point was that Su Ming would absolutely not give up on this chance. Su Ming stared at the sky and mumbled after a long while. Then what about the First Era? Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos' oldest First Era. Just how strong were the people at that time? If my guess is correct, the predecessor of Tao Ocean is just an antecedental spirit. He worshipped the First Era's ancestral spirit and obtained great power from it. Then, just how strong were the ancestral spirits who had the universe at their beck and call during the First Era of Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos? Where did they come from? Why did they disappear? Do they still exist? Su Ming narrowed his eyes. If all these guesses could be verified, then an even more unbelievable thought would appear in his head. He suddenly had a feeling that perhaps some of the things he knew were wrong. For example, regardless of whether it was him, the black-robed old man who possessed him, or all the things he had experienced in his life, all pointed in the same direction. Dark Dawn and Saint Defier each had 180 expanse cosmoses. They were ancient and eternal existences, and Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos was like a newly born universe before them. It might seem weak, but in truth, if it had enough time, it could grow into an ancient expanse cosmos like Dark Dawn and Saint Defier. If this statement was wrong, what if Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos was not new compared to Dark Dawn and Saint Defier, but its existence had surpassed them? Su Ming did not continue thinking about it. He put an end to his guess. There was no basis for it. It was just a thought that even Su Ming found slightly absurd. He ended all his thoughts, but all these speculations were buried deep in his heart. He quietly turned his head around and looked at the white mountain where he was. He looked at the black cave behind him, and a glint appeared in his eyes, but he did not immediately step in. Instead, he slowly sat down cross-legged and did not move a single inch outside the cave. Time passed, and Su Ming sat there for half a month. When the color of the fog changed continuously and turned purple, Su Ming stood up and left the mountain to rush into the purple fog. 3 days later, when Su Ming charged out of the purple fog, he returned to the cave in the mountain. This time, he no longer hesitated. With a single move, he charged towards the entrance of the cave. He wanted to go to Heavenly Spirit Tribe and see whether his guesses regarding the 4 eras and spirit ascension were correct. He had not immediately stepped into the cave half a month ago because at that time, when the ripples from the ring had erupted twice, he had already used up nearly 8/10 of his cultivation base. He did not know whether there were any dangers in Heavenly Spirit Tribe. Su Ming's cautious nature prevented him from acting recklessly. At that moment, he had already hunted a large number of ferocious beasts in the purple fog. Once he devoured their blood, his cultivation base recovered to around 8/10 of his original level of cultivation. Only then did he return. The cave entrance was long and thin, and it extended downwards. Su Ming did not move quickly in the cave. He spread his divine sense outwards and charged downwards through the cave entrance. Time trickled by. Su Ming continued moving forward in the cave, and after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he finally appeared in a huge cave abode. At the instant he walked out of the tunnel and saw the interior of the cave abode clearly, a shudder ran through his body, and he sucked in a deep breath. It was a huge cave abode. A small part of it was inside the mountain, and most of it was on the ground under the mountain. A gigantic pit had been dug out, and what was there were skeletons that had been dead for an unknown number of years. This was no Heavenly Spirit Tribe. It was clearly a pit of corpses. There were quite a number of children who had yet to reach adulthood among the skeletons. Perhaps they had been part of a tribe known as Heavenly Spirit Tribe when they were alive, but now they were all dead and had been pushed into the pit. They were pushed up high into the air, and their bones were all black. It was a terrifying sight to behold, and at the same time, a ghastly presence surrounded the area. Su Ming was silent, but he had clearly heard the old voice coming from this place half a month ago. He had clearly seen the red figures who had failed the spirit ascension show fear on their apathetic faces as they swiftly retreated, as if they were incredibly terrified of that voice. Su Ming looked around quietly. It was dead silent, and not a single sound could be heard. When his gaze landed on the stone walls of the cave abode around him, his pupils shrank. He saw some carvings on the walls. These were carvings that were habitually used by the people in the tribe to record some pictures. Su Ming knew this. At that moment, he moved closer to the carvings and looked at them carefully. The first carving depicted a beautiful and gigantic tribe. It was filled with peace and harmony, and there was a sun and moon in the sky. In the second carving, Su Ming could see the people in the tribe worshiping a statue. That statue was of a man with long hair. It was clear that this statue had been worshipped by the tribe for an unknown number of years. They were kneeling before the statue with devout expressions on their faces. The third carving was of a teenager in the tribe. He was sent to the statue, and once he knelt down, he looked as if he had obtained some sort of legacy. When Su Ming saw this, his heart suddenly trembled. He was incredibly familiar with this scene. It was clearly the Berserker's awakening when he was in the land of Berserkers. His body flickered as he moved to another wall to continue his examination. He saw that in the fourth carving, there was a huge stone platform on which an old man was kneeling. The old man's hands were raised in the air as if he were calling out to the heavens. There was a gigantic face in the sky, and that face belonged to the statue of the man Su Ming had seen previously. That man was looking at the land and the people on the ground with a gentle gaze. There was a smile on his face, and he seemed to have bestowed some sort of power to the old man. A halo of light spread out from the old man's entire body. In the fifth carving, Su Ming saw that the man's face in the sky was no longer smiling. Instead, there was some sort of grief on his face. The people in the tribe on the ground were all kneeling on the ground, and there was also grief on their faces. The man's face was no longer there in the sixth carving. The sun and moon in the sky had shattered, but Su Ming could see that there were countless figures within the sun and moon that had aged. It was as if they were disappearing, and as they did so, they were also looking at the land. There was a reluctance to part, sadness, and a thick aura of death in their eyes. It was as if they were about to die, but before they died, as if they were worried about the lives on the ground, they joined forces and lifted their hands to push towards the air. A towering hall appeared there. However, there was a bolt of lightning striking down from the sky above the palace hall. When Su Ming saw this, his heart trembled. He could understand the meaning contained in the picture. There was a high possibility that those figures were the ancestral spirits of the first era. Due to a destruction that had descended for some unknown reason, they left the place and walked towards death. But before they died, they gathered all their power together and created a hall. However, when the hall was created, a bolt of lightning descended, causing some deviation to appear in the hall. This was the meaning that the carvings were trying to convey. Su Ming fell silent and continued looking at the last two carvings. There was a palace in the sky, and there were many people worshiping it on the platforms that had once been on the ground, but their expressions were ferocious and crazed. There was an indistinct figure carved above them, and that figure exuded the will of death. It was dressed in a long robe, and Su Ming could tell with just one glance that it was the red figure he had seen. When he saw this, Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. The carvings verified some of his guesses. The red figures who had failed in the ascension of their spirits were once members of the tribes on the ground. In silence, Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the last picture, but when he did so, he did not notice that a figure had appeared behind him at some unknown point of time. It was an old man covered in dirt. His gaze was fixed on Su Ming, and there was an unfocused look in his eyes. He stood behind Su Ming. Second chapter, please get monthly votes. Chapter 1293. The carving, the final picture, was incredibly complicated, and there was even a hint of roughness to it. It was as if the person who carved it was in some sort of unstable state of mind, but he still continued carving, as if he wanted to record something down. There was an old man on the platform high above in the carving. He had his arms lifted and was floating in the hall above him. Beneath him were countless people kneeling and worshiping him. Excitement and hope appeared on their faces. However, if anyone looked at that excitement from another perspective, they would find that it was not excitement but fear. Similarly, if someone looked at it from another perspective, they would find that it was no longer hope but despair and grief. The picture ended. The crude carving was completely different from the previous ones. It was as if the story had not ended. Su Ming fell silent. When he turned around, he looked around him once again, but he could not find the old figure behind him watching him quietly. Su Ming swept his gaze across the area and frowned. He could not sense any signs of life in this place, but the voice from before had clearly appeared. In his silence, Su Ming's pupils suddenly shrank. He saw that there seemed to be a different region beside the pit of corpses. With one move, he charged towards the pit of corpses. In the blink of an eye, he closed in, and he stared at the spot beside the pit of corpses. There was a faint depression on the ground near the wall. That depression made it seem as if someone had meditated there for an unknown number of years, and the stone had slowly sunk down to form the brand of someone meditating there. When Su Ming saw that brand, his pupils shrank. Once he closed in, he crouched down, lifted his right hand, and swiped it across the depression. With it, all the hair on his body instantly stood up because there was a faint warmth spreading out from that spot. This meant that there had been someone meditating there not too long ago. That is where I meditate. At that moment, an old voice came from behind Su Ming. That voice had appeared incredibly suddenly, and Su Ming had not noticed it at all. It was as if someone was whispering into his ears, causing his cultivation base to erupt from his body without any hesitation. When he rushed forward, he turned around swiftly, but when he did so, he saw nothing. Su Ming's heart raced, and his skin crawled. Suddenly, someone patted his shoulder lightly. "What are you looking for?" Su Ming's expression changed. This time, he did not immediately turn around. Instead, without a hint of hesitation, he lifted his right hand, and ripples spread out from the ring. At the instant they spread outwards, he charged into the distance. When he rushed out, he turned around with great force and looked behind him, but even so, he still did not see anything. Su Ming's heart raced against his chest. He might not be able to see the person, but he was certain that the person was right behind him. In silence, Su Ming calmed himself down and sat down cross-legged. If this person wanted to attack him, he would have done so a long time ago. Since he had not done so, Su Ming could only smile wryly and sit down cross-legged. "Thank you for saving me, Senior." It was quiet all around them. Su Ming seemed to be talking to himself. There was no reply. Time trickled by, and in the blink of an eye, an hour went by. A thought appeared in Su Ming's mind, and he slowly stood up and walked towards the exit of the cave abode. Yet the instant he reached the exit, the air around him suddenly distorted. In an instant, Su Ming laughed wryly when he discovered that for some unknown reason, he had been relocated to the spot where he had been meditating previously. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Senior, you're not speaking, and neither are you asking me to leave. If you have any orders for me, then please tell me. If I can do it, I will definitely do my best to repay you for saving me." A long while after Su Ming's words left his mouth, a flat voice came from behind him. "Which tribe are you from?" "Dark Mountain Tribe. I am a member of Dark Mountain Tribe." A thought appeared in Su Ming's heart. Without any hesitation, he immediately answered. He was already prepared for the person to definitely not have heard of the tribe before and would speak once he asked about it. Yet, just as Su Ming was waiting for the person to question him, he heard the ancient voice behind him say something that caused his heart to tremble. Dark Mountain Tribe is one of the 13 tribes that were split from Great Berserker Tribe. When those words fell into Su Ming's ears, his heart trembled. At the same time, the old man's right hand appeared on his shoulder. The dried-up right hand only patted his shoulder once, and a domineering presence immediately seeped into Su Ming's body. It swam through his body once before rushing towards his soul. It did not perform any soul search. It only touched Su Ming's soul briefly, and the presence fell back to his shoulder, returning to the withered right hand that had landed on Su Ming's shoulder. You do indeed have the presence of a berserker's initiation, but your soul belongs to Great Abyss Tribe. There is also a hint of nourishment in your soul that does not belong to this world. Humph, I was the one who was the most opposed to intermarriage in the past, but you can be considered a berserker, so you did not lie. When the old voice echoed in the air, a huge storm raged in Su Ming's mind. Dark Mountain Tribe? There really is a Dark Mountain Tribe? Berserkers? Great Berserker Tribe? And my soul? He actually said that it's Great Abyss Tribe? This is... Su Ming could not calm his heart. His mind was completely thrown into turmoil by the old man's words. I will make a deal with you, young berserker. Since you were able to come here, you can be considered to be fated with me. Your soul and presence might be a little mixed, but regardless of whether it's Great Berserker Tribe or Great Abyss Tribe, you can still be considered a member of the younger generation of my friendly tribe. This deal will be a great serendipity for you, the ancient voice said faintly, and there was a decaying air that came with age. Su Ming did not immediately ask about the serendipity. Instead, he hesitated for a moment, then forced down the great shock stirred up in his heart by the old man's words, and said in a low voice, Senior, if you had determined that I was not a member of the younger generation of your friendly tribe, you would have been the same as all the others who came here over the countless years. I soul-searched you, skinned you, and picked off your bones. Once you were air-dried, some seasoning was added, and you were fed to the sacrificial beasts, the old man said faintly. A barely noticeable glint shone in Su Ming's eyes, and he asked another question. What about the other members of the younger generation of our friendly tribe who obtained your great serendipity? They were among the defective goods you saw in the red fog in the world outside. The old man's voice was as indifferent as ever, but when it landed in Su Ming's ears, it turned into a freezing chill. Su Ming was silent. The old man did not speak either. When the time it takes for an incense stick to burn passed, Su Ming smiled wryly and sighed. Senior, your great serendipity is a chance for me to ascend to become an antecedental spirit, right? Boy, you're quite a smart one. You must have deduced this from the words I said when I chased away those defective goods, right? That's right. The great serendipity I'm giving you is a chance for your spirit to ascend. Since you like to analyze things, then you can analyze what sort of deal I need you to complete with this serendipity. If you can guess it, I will give you some rewards. The old man paused for a moment, as if some emotions that did not exist previously had appeared in his voice, but he still spoke faintly. You only have one chance to guess. When the old man's voice echoed in the air, Su Ming's eyes sparkled. Senior, you shouldn't be thinking of leaving this place. When Su Ming said those words languidly, the old man behind him let out a cold harumph. Don't try to play these useless tricks. Senior, you want me to help you find out who it was that killed your clansman? Su Ming suddenly said. His voice was firm and resolute. This was Su Ming's gamble, but even if he lost, he would not suffer any losses. However, Su Ming wanted to win because he had been in a passive position when he came into contact with the old man. The old man had always been behind him, and a shadow had already been planted in his heart. In fact, that shadow would only grow bigger until Su Ming no longer had any desire to fight back. His mind would be completely controlled by the old man. He wanted to seize the initiative, but even if it was an insignificant initiative, it was still a form of resistance and a struggle for Su Ming. And this answer was not something Su Ming came up with out of nowhere. He had come to this conclusion based on a few clues. One of them was that this place had already been reduced to ruins and turned into the burial ground of Heavenly Spirit Tribe, but the old man was still there. He was quietly accompanying his people, and from this, Su Ming could tell a few things. Furthermore, the last carving was clearly crude. The things depicted in the carving were filled with strangeness, as if there was no end to it. There were a lot of things that could have happened. The Heavenly Spirit Tribe had either died because their lifespans had come to an end, but the fact that there were children among the skeletons erased that possibility. There was also the possibility that they had been killed by the red figures, but with the old man's strength, while this was a possibility, it was also impossible. There was also another possibility, which was that it had been caused by other external factors. However, Su-Ming only had one chance to make a guess, which was why he gave this answer without any hesitation. Even though he had said it, Su-Ming was not confident. However, when the person behind him remained silent after he finished speaking, Su-Ming knew that there was a possibility that his guess was correct. Perhaps I should have agreed to the marriage between the races in the past. After a long while, a long sigh came from behind Su-Ming. You're very smart, and you're good at observing details. Your guess is correct, but also wrong. I was the one who killed my people. Tell me the reward you want. There was a hint of grief in the old man's voice as it echoed in the air. Su-Ming remained silent for a moment. Then a glint appeared in his eyes as he said resolutely, I do not want any reward. I only wish to see your true face, Senior. You're indeed very smart. Being able to see and not being able to see a person's face is completely different. After some time, when the old voice echoed in the air in front of Su-Ming distorted, and an old man slowly walked out. The old man might have been dirty, but Su-Ming could still recognize him at first glance. He was the old man in the final picture, the one who was worshipped by countless people while sitting on the tall platform with his arms outstretched toward the palace in the sky. There was a profound look in the old man's eyes, but there was apathy and confusion in them. However, most of the time, it was so profound that no one would be able to look him in the eye. It was as if a person's soul would be sucked into his gaze. He stood there, and not a single ripple of power could be sensed from his body. However, Su-Ming could sense a mighty pressure that was much stronger than when he saw the predecessor of Tao Ocean in the past. It was as if there was a difference of an entire realm between this person and the predecessor of Tao Ocean. 3 updates for 2 days in a row. Would there still be any monthly votes left? Chapter 1294. You also have a will hidden in your body. It is a weak antecedental spirit who managed to avoid the disaster, but managed to survive after being split countless times. It possesses some consciousness of a spirit, but it is so dim that it is about to be extinguished. That should be one of the antecedental spirits of Sand Earthling's tribe. The old man cast Su-Ming a faint glance. It was as if he could see through Su-Ming's body and see all his secrets. When his words echoed in the air, Su-Ming's heart trembled, but he did not show a single hint of it on his face. Once he saw the face of the mysterious old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe, Su-Ming buried his wariness in the depths of his heart. It did not matter whether it was his expression or his demeanor. Most of the time, he had only shown them so that the old man would know and see them. After all, a person who truly did not show his emotions on his face was usually very easy to find out, and it was also very easy for others to be on guard against him. That was why he needed to hide himself and put on a false front to hide all the changes in his heart. Su-Ming knew who the old man was talking about. It was the Sand Earthling spirit. He claimed to be an ancestral spirit, but in truth, he was just an antecedental spirit. The old man's words also answered one of the questions Su-Ming had when he thought of the predecessor of Tao Ocean. When he thought of the predecessor of Tao Ocean, the Sand Earthling spirit's figure had appeared in his heart, and he had been uncertain about it. By the looks of it, the Sand Earthling spirit was indeed not the ancestral spirit he claimed to be, but just an antecedental spirit. The Sand Earthling spirit had been sleeping all this while, and Su-Ming had never summoned it. Since the seed of life extermination had left, Su-Ming did not know whether any unnecessary accidents would happen to him if he summoned the Sand Earthling spirit. Senior, you mentioned that I have the presence of the other races. Su-Ming knew that he should not take the initiative to ask this question. Instead, he should ignore it as if it was nothing, or if the old man did not continue searching for it, then he should not pay attention to it. This might be the right choice to carry out the trade with the old man. But Su-Ming still asked. If he did not understand everything clearly, then there was a high possibility that the so-called serendipity would turn him into a part of the red figure and turn him into a defective product that had failed in the ascension of his spirit. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever as he looked at the old man. He asked languidly. When he said those words, a cold glare appeared in the old man's eyes. He stared at Su Ming and did not speak for a long time. Su Ming did not speak either. Instead, he looked at the old man quietly. His level of cultivation might not be as great as this old man's, and it might be incredibly easy for this old man to kill him. But even so, Su Ming would not lose his courage to meet his gaze. Outsiders are naturally the dark race and the saint race. They are outsiders to the various tribes of the desolate race. After a while, the old man coldly said these words. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes. The old man's words. The old man, Su Ming, is arid triad expanse cosmos known as 3 because of this? The old man looked at Su Ming, and a profound look appeared on his face. He lifted his head to look at the top of the cave abode, and there seemed to be a sentimental look on his face. You've already noticed some of the ancient history. Do you want to verify it with me? Very well. Agree to our trade, and I will tell you everything. It is a past that has been buried in the passage of time. It is a story I personally experienced, the old man said calmly. The old man spoke calmly. His voice was filled with the vicissitudes of life. It reverberated through the cave that was filled with bones, like the howling wind of time. Su Ming was silent. After some time, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he nodded slowly. I can agree to your request, Senior, but I want answers to all my questions. Triad is known as 3, because when the ancestral spirits created all lives in the universe during the ancient past, there were 3 races in the world. One of them was the dark, the other was the sacred, and the last was the barren. There were many tribes in each of the 3 races. There was nostalgia on the old man's face. His voice was faint, as if it had traveled through the passage of time. Then ancient Wu, ancient Shu, and ancient Wei, an arid triad expanse cosmos. Su Ming immediately said, I don't know about the ancient you speak of, but I do know that when the tribes of the dark race developed to the later stage of the era of the ancestral spirits, all their tribes were collectively known as Wu. Similarly, the sacred race also created a tribe known as Shu under the call of their ancestral spirits. And we, the arid race, are the way you speak of. When the old man's voice echoed in the air, Su Ming might have looked calm, but there was a storm raging in his heart. The old man's words had answered Su Ming's questions and also made him remember young Master Tian Wu, whom he had met in Divine Essence Star Ocean. That Almighty might have died in the 5th kiln, but Su Ming would never forget how he had activated the so-called blood of ancient Wu during the final battle. When he remembered that Tian Wu's true form was that of a huge centipede, Su Ming's mind was swiftly enlightened. Those from Dark Dawn practiced the method of cultivating their inner cores. In truth, while the people in that camp might seem like cultivators, they were in truth formed from all sorts of strange creatures. This was completely the same as young Master Tian Wu, but they are no longer the dark race or the sacred race. They call themselves Dark Dawn and Saint Defire. When Su Ming said those words, he stopped and looked at the old man. The old man was silent. After some time, he sighed softly. There are also camps among the ancestral spirits, or else why would Wu, Shu, and Wei appear? But no matter which camp it was, most of them died in a disaster that I didn't know about in the past, but now I have a vague understanding of it. In the era when all spirits died, their legacies were lost, and the antecedental spirits rose to power and became few in number. The hall of legacy shattered, and the people who failed in the spirit ascension wreaked havoc, causing a war between the 3 races to break out. During that war, Wei disappeared. The arid race that Wei represented also fell apart, but Wu and Shu also paid a devastating price. That war symbolized the end of the era of tribes after the era of ancestral spirits. It also meant that Arid Triad was no longer suitable for all races to live in. Hence, besides a small number of people from Wu and Shu who chose to stay, most of the surviving members of the two races left Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos to search for and create a home that was suitable for them to live in. Many years later, a member of the younger generation who barged into this place triggered the seal in this place, and I woke up from my slumber. I looked through the memories of that member of the younger generation before he died, and I learned that after the era of tribes, the third era appeared. 9 true worlds appeared, and from his memories, I learned about Dark Dawn and Saint D Fire. When the old man said those words, he looked at Su Ming. Su Ming fell silent. The truth caused his heart to tremble, and it also verified his guesses. However, even though he had guessed most of it, the parts regarding Saint D Fire and Dark Dawn that he did not manage to guess still made it difficult for him to calm down. I see, so that's how it is. It's no wonder then why the difference in combat power between people in the same realm is so great. So that's how it is. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath, and a glint suddenly appeared in his eyes. Was the All-Spirits Hall created by the ancestral spirits of the 3 races, or it was created by the ancestral spirits of Wei? Similarly, there are similar things in Wu and Shu, the old man said slowly. In that case, I have one last question. Whether it's the Wu, the Shu, or our Wei, the ancestor spirits who created them, just what are they? Where do they come from? Why did they come here to create the heavens and the 3 races? At the same time, Su Ming asked this question, the memory of when he was still an ignorant teenager in Dark Mountain appeared in his head. He had read one sentence on a beast skin scroll about the legends of the Berserkers on Dark Mountain. The Berserkers had an ancestor who created the world and created men. So, legends are not just legends. That seemingly normal sentence that I thought was a myth is real. Su Ming's expression changed several times as he looked at the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. Perhaps there was a great era before the era of the ancestral spirits. The old man was silent for a moment before he sighed softly. There was an ancient air contained in his sigh, and when all those who heard it, they felt as if their souls had turned to dust. The cultivation bases of the lives in that era surpassed our imaginations. They were incredibly powerful, but under an unknown disaster, the entire era was destroyed. Only a few people survived. They created Arid Triad, but in the end, they still could not escape from fate, and they died. I've thought about your question before, but I'm not trying to guess why they came. Instead, I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking if I can live longer and witness the changes of eras until the day comes when Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, where we live and the vast galaxy beyond, are destroyed in a disaster we cannot fight against. If I can still survive, what will I do? If it were you, what would you do? The old man mumbled. I will use my abilities to create another universe, so that the legacy can continue and the brand will not be wiped off. Su Ming's heart trembled. He stared at the old man before him, and the old man stared back at him. Su Ming understood the answer the old man had given him with those words. I've answered your questions. Now, you must fulfill your promise and complete our deal. I will give you the serendipity of having your spirit ascend, and once you succeed, you must use the power of All Spirits Hall to return to the past and stop me from losing control while I slaughter my people. Even if you can't stop me, you must leave a point there that will allow me to return to the past countless times. A hint of determined madness appeared in the old man's eyes. He glared at Su Ming, as if he refused, he would immediately kill him, even if he was a member of the younger generation from his tribe. Su Ming fell silent. He stared at the old man. Even though he had thought of what the old man wanted him to do during the deal, and even though the old man had let him see his face, Su Ming still did not expect that the old man's thoughts would be so insane. Changing the past. Forget about whether such a thing truly existed. Even if it did, if it could be easily done, the ancestral spirits before the old man would not have thought of it. But they still died. Everyone, I have a favor to ask. Does anyone know if a child with an enlarged proliferative body needs surgery? If surgery is not needed, then medicine is needed. What kind of medicine is needed? or which hospital is better for this disease. I'm asking for your help, my daughter. Chapter 1295. Su Ming quietly stared at the determination in the old man's eyes. He suddenly felt slight pity for the old man. He might be incredibly powerful, but he had always lived in self-blame and regret. He was an old man who would do anything to change his people's fates in madness. I will keep my promise, Su Ming said softly. This is your serendipity. If you fail in the ascension of your spirit, you will become a soul without consciousness. But if you succeed, you will become an antecedental spirit from a successor spirit. The determination in the old man's eyes became firmer. He stared at Su Ming, and when his words landed in his ears, a glint suddenly shone in his eyes. I'm a successor spirit. Of course you're a successor spirit. I learned from the cultivators of the younger generation who barged into this place about the so-called successor spirits and antecedental spirits that appeared in the new era after my era ended. You obtained great berserker tribes berserkers awakening, which is the true berserker's awakening. You also obtained great abyss tribes abyss sense. With these two things added together, you are no longer an ordinary antecedental spirit, but a successor spirit. If you take another step forward, you will become an antecedental spirit, but the ravine of that step is the fault between two eras. If there was no all-spirits hall, then no matter how much you cultivate, it would be difficult for you to cross it. But now, this is your serendipity. When Su Ming heard the old man's words, he remembered how he was different from the other almighties in Arid Triad. When he remembered how he could fight against the cultivators from Saint Defire's camp, he understood the reason behind it. With my level of cultivation, I can extract 3 displays of spirit ascension from the passage of time. You only have 3 chances to observe it. Whether you will succeed or not will depend on these 3 chances. I hope that you will succeed, but I have to say, even in my era, there were very few people who succeeded in spirit ascension. The old man cast Su Ming a complicated look. He swung his arm, and Su Ming immediately felt the air around him distort. In an instant, his vision blurred. When his world became clear again, they were no longer in the cave abode, but on a towering platform in a layer of white fog. They stood on the platform. When Su Ming lowered his head to look, he saw endless white fog, along with some faintly discernible mountains. You've experienced the true berserker's initiation, so you can be considered a berserker. Then the first thing I'll let you see is the scene of the powerful berserkers ascending their spirits countless years ago. A piercing, brilliant light shone in the old man's eyes, and his cultivation base erupted endlessly with a bang. The power of his cultivation base instantly spread in all directions, causing the sky to tremble, the fog on the ground to tumble violently, and Su Ming to feel as if he was about to suffocate. When the old man spread out his power, Su Ming immediately had the misconception that the person standing before him was not the old man, but a vast expanse of mountains and rivers, a universe, a complete world, and even an expanse cosmos in the galaxy. All of this seemed to be contained in the old man's body. As Su Ming stared at the old man, his heart trembled, and he immediately compared him to all the powerful warriors he had seen before, be it Sui Chunzi or the predecessor of Dao Ocean. When Su Ming remembered the figure in Avacania realm he saw before Arid Triad's gap was blasted open in the Immortals' Union, his heart trembled again. He's indeed in Avacania realm. This was the first time Su Ming witnessed the might of those in Avacania realm with his own eyes. It was an indescribable strength that made it seem as if the old man could make the world disappear if he willed it. As long as he willed it, the world and the universe would change before him. It was a realm that surpassed a certain realm and stood above the universe, above space, and above the galaxy. This is definitely not the power of an antecedental spirit. Su Ming's breathing quickened. He had seen antecedental spirits before, and it did not matter whether it was the sand spirit or the predecessor of Dao Ocean. They had never been so strong. This is the power of a person who has gone through 8 successful spirit ascensions. He is only one step away from becoming an ancestral spirit. Avicania. Perhaps it fits the Avicania realm you speak of, but to me, if I can go through 9 successful spirit ascensions, then my realm will not be the Avicania realm you speak of, but Avicania. There are no ancestral spirits in Avicania realm. The old man lifted his right hand and swung his arm in the sky. With it, the world roared, and a huge vortex swiftly appeared in the sky. It rotated with loud bangs and spread out in all directions. Wherever it went, the sky would be reduced to countless shards. As cracking sounds echoed in the air, the entire sky turned into the land after a great drought. The cracks shattered, and the shards swept through the area. The fog on the ground tumbled backwards, and Su Ming immediately sensed the white ring on his finger buzzing. That buzzing was a form of trembling. It was an instinctive shudder when it ran into a power that was much stronger than its own. It also made Su Ming understand that even though the ring was a supreme treasure in Avicania realm, it was still weaker than the old man. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe is a powerful warrior from Arid Triad who is even stronger than the one from Saint Defire who created this ring. Perhaps he should be known as the Arid God. As Su Ming's heart trembled, the countless shards in the sky swept through the area. With an extreme speed, they gathered together once again, as if they had turned into another sky. Light shone in that sky, and when it descended on the ground, it was as if time and space had been switched. Su Ming saw a person appearing on the platform before him. That person was incredibly tall and built, and the presence of the Berserker tribe that Su Ming was familiar with spread out from that person's body without reservation. Even though he could only see his back, the resonance from Berserkers made Su Ming feel as if he was looking at someone incredibly familiar. The man's entire body was covered in scars that had already healed. When he stood on the platform, he looked as if he was standing above the world. The ground had to submit to him, and the sky had to lower its head. Berserker! 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 Low roars came from below. When Su Ming lowered his head to look, he immediately saw an innumerable number of berserkers on the ground under the platform. They stood there and were roaring loudly. Their presence was so strong that they were like long arcs that pierced through the sky, causing the ground and sky to tremble. This is the scene of your berserker's 83rd elder ascending his spirit countless years ago. This is the first time his spirit ascended, but in the end he failed. Watch carefully. I used my power to tear apart the sky, to hide from Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos will, and extract this scene from his memories. The old man's voice echoed in Su Ming's ears. Beside him, the old man's figure slowly appeared. With a sentimental gaze, he stared at the back of the man on the platform. Su Ming's pupil shrank. He remembered the old man's words in his heart. So once you reach a certain level of cultivation, you can tear apart the sky, hide from Arid Triad's will, and extract its memories. However, he could only hide it. That one word alone was enough to tell that there was still a difference between the old man's level of cultivation and Arid Triad's wills. He could only hide it, and not ignore Arid Triad's will and forcefully extract his memories. When Su Ming remembered all of this, he placed all his attention on the berserker in front of him. He saw the man throwing his head back and roaring. Veins popped up all over his body, and a thick power of chi erupted from him with a bang. Not a single ripple of power could be detected in that eruption, but the powerful power of chi was enough to suppress all levels of cultivation and crush all barriers. Berserkers are a tribe that can fight against the gods of Sichuan's sacred land. Their physical strength has already reached an indescribable state, the old man beside Su Ming mumbled. He seemed to be mumbling to himself, but at the same time, he seemed to be speaking to Su Ming. At that moment, as the berserker roared, a ripple spread out from his body. That ripple was a wave of air, and, as it rumbled, it reverberated in the sky, causing it to immediately distort as if it was about to be torn apart. A hall Su Ming had seen before appeared. It was the Spirit Descending Hall, the place where countless red figures had appeared when Su Ming had been chased down. Once the hall descended, it floated in midair. Soon after, The sky behind it distorted again, and a huge hall that shone with endless golden light appeared. Compared to the spirit descending hall, it was like comparing an adult to a child. The golden hall that descended was completely revealed in the midst of the booming sounds. It looked as if there was no end to it. Su Ming could vaguely see a plate on it, and there were 2 words written on it. All spirits. During the first spirit ascension, only one spirit descending hall appeared. During my 8th spirit ascension, 8 spirit descending halls surrounded all spirits. The old man beside Su Ming said faintly. At the instant the gigantic golden all spirits hall appeared, golden light that reached 100,000 feet spread out to the ground, causing the sky and earth to instantly turn golden. Then, countless shadows swiftly appeared in the hall. These shadows were not the red figures who had chased down Su Ming. Instead, there were people dressed in long robes. There were men and women among them, and they floated outside the golden hall. They seemed to have an incredibly strict hierarchy. The person at the top shone with a golden light that reached 100,000 feet, and he was filled with a mighty pressure that could suffocate others. Below him were 3 people, and below them were 8 people, 17 people, 39 people, 86 people, and the last 881 people. These are... Su Ming stared at the 2,000-something shadows outside the hall. He could tell that they were not real people, but were formed by some sort of aura that looked like seeds of power. They were arranged according to some sort of rule. There were 10 horizontal rows, and if the only figure at the top was not included, then there were 9 rows below it. These are the positions of the ancestral spirits. There are a total of 2,603 ancestral spirits. Spirit ascension means choosing one of these ancestral spirits and fusing with them. The first time you fuse with them, you can only choose from the bottom row, and so on and so forth. There's a need for luck in this. If you have enough luck, you can slowly fuse with them until the 9th time, until you reach the only figure at the top. The different choices also represent the strength of the compatibility between the ancestral spirits and themselves. You will need to try again and again, and only one precious member of your race who has the right to undergo spirit ascension will appear every few hundred years. They will gamble with the mentality of sacrificing themselves for their race. Once they fail, they will die, and they will turn into mindless, killing souls. The members of each race will remember the order in which the people who tried to fuse with them failed, so that the latecomers will not have to choose, but will try the next one, the old man said slowly with a soft sigh. I've seen all of them in Yuden John's hospital. When I saw the faces of the doctors, I really wanted to hit them. When I saw the scans of the children, they said that they needed surgery, and the children were so scared that they cried. I was anxious and wanted to ask them in detail, but most of them had impatient looks on their faces. They kept saying that they needed to be hospitalized for surgery, how they should be operated on, whether it was due to allergies, whether conservative treatment was possible, whether the proliferators were large, and they didn't explain any of these things. I can only ask for help from all of you here. If it gets worse over the next few days, I plan to go to a better hospital in another city to have it checked out. Chapter 1296. As Su Ming listened to the old man's words, he stared at the 2,000-something shadows beyond the golden hall in the sky. His heart trembled because of the devastating will in the old man's words. There were a total of 881 ancestral spirits in the row at the bottom, but perhaps only one of them was suitable for the race's bloodline to be offered as an offering for spirit ascension. This meant that hundreds of people who had the right to have their spirits ascend had to be sacrificed, and with their deaths, they had to pave a path for spirit ascension. Clearly, even if the different races belonged to Wei, Great Berserker Tribe, Great Abyss Tribe, and Heavenly Spirit Tribe had to search for ancestral spirits suitable for their race to fuse with in the row at the bottom. Since each race chose different paths, there was no common ground, which was why the path of spirit ascension was filled with blood. It was built with lives. And this was just the beginning. Even if they managed to find a suitable ancestor spirit in the bottom row, there was still the second row from the bottom all the way to the top. Along the way, the ones who died were all experts. They were all people who had the right to ascend. Similarly, it would also cause a tribe to gradually wither away. If there were any who managed to persevere, then, in the end, a true ancestor spirit would appear. But in this world, hundreds of thousands of years were needed, and time did not give the races such a chance. As the era of tribes was destroyed, everything turned into nothingness. Even the order and number of the ancestral spirits that could be fused with the bloodline of each race, which was believed to be the most precious by the tribes, were mostly buried in dust. In silence, Su Ming saw the tall berserker on the platform throw his head back and roar. He shot up from the ground and charged into the sky. If he did not include the only golden figure at the top, then he would charge towards the 567th ancestral spirit in the 9th row, which was the last row. When his body touched the ancestral spirit, countless berserkers on the ground roared, and the land instantly fell into dead silence. Su Ming saw with his own eyes that at the instant the berserker touched the 560th shadow of the ancestral spirit, his body shuddered violently, as if an unimaginable pain had erupted in his body at that moment. At the same time, the man lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the sky, as if he had grabbed something from space. Then he pushed his hand swiftly in the direction of the ancestral spirit that had fused with him. Eternal creation. The person who said those words was not the burly man, because his body had already turned into dust when he trembled. A red light flew out from his dissipating body and floated in the sky in a daze, as if he wanted to lower his head to look at his people one last time, but he could not do it. His body was dragged towards the spirit dissension hall by a powerful suction force. A shrill scream of pain rang out, and everything fell silent. The person who said those words was the old man beside Su Ming. His soft words caused Su Ming to stare at the red figure in a daze. His soul was sucked away, and he fell silent. The sky returned to normal. It did not matter whether it was Spirit Dissension Hall or All Spirits Hall. All of them had disappeared from the sky. Only the countless berserkers on the ground remained silent, along with a thick wave of sorrow. Eternal creation is an art unique to Great Berserker Tribe. It's difficult for outsiders to understand it. Only berserkers can understand it, and it's the strongest art in Great Berserker Tribe. Even I, who has gone through 8 spirit ascensions, will have to temporarily avoid the eternal creation of a powerful warrior from Great Berserker Tribe who is at the same level as me. The old man's voice echoed in the air and turned into invisible ripples that swept in all directions, causing distortions to appear in the world. When the scene disappeared from Su Ming's eyes and everything around him returned to being filled with white fog, Su Ming sighed softly. It was as if he had woken up from the previous era and stepped into the current era. Next, I will bring you to see Great Abyss Tribe's Spirit Ascension, the old man beside Su Ming said calmly after a long while. The old man beside Su Ming said calmly after a long while. He swung his arm, and immediately the feeling of the world turning upside down appeared again. When everything became clear, Su Ming was already far away from the previous platform and had arrived in a vast layer of fog. The fog in this place was incredibly thick. As it surrounded the area, the old man lifted his right hand and swung his arm, and the fog scattered to reveal a huge pit whose end could not be seen with the naked eye. There were at least hundreds of spirit ascension platforms in it. They surrounded the area and stood tall in the pit, giving off a feeling that they could reach the clouds. Great Berserker Tribe is a tribe I admire quite a lot. The people in this tribe might not be scheming, but they are straightforward and fearless of death. This spirit is something other tribes do not possess. Even my heavenly spirit tribe cannot compare to Great Berserker Tribe in this aspect. However, if I were to say that among all the tribes underway, there's only one tribe I admire the most and am even slightly jealous of, and that is Great Abyss Tribe. The old man stood on one of the hundreds of platforms and looked around him while speaking softly. This is where Great Abyss Tribe's new tribe is located. This place used to be a vast ocean in the past. That ocean was known as the Abyss Sea, and it was also known as the Forbidden Grounds and Way. Great Abyss Tribe is skilled in the power of time, and they're skilled in possessing all manner of things. Some of their powerful warriors can even open the Abyss Gate and create their own world. Besides these three great inborn abilities, the most terrifying thing about Great Abyss Tribe is that their souls will never die. Their souls will never die. This is the supreme power of Great Abyss Tribe that those who have activated all three great inborn abilities can understand. Once they understand it, their souls will practically never die. No matter how many cycles of reincarnation they go through, they will still exist. This is something that makes others jealous and feel helpless about it. When the old man sighed with emotion, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm. The world immediately roared, and the sky shattered. Countless fragments swept outwards before gathering together once more. A wave of ripples swept outwards in all directions. As it swept outwards, the world changed because of it. It was as if dust had been lifted from a picture and bright colors were revealed. As the ripples spread out, Su Ming saw a world belonging to Great Abyss Tribe. It was a black ocean with waves tumbling about. Hundreds of stone platforms stood erect in the ocean, as if they were connected to the sky. There were people sitting cross-legged on most of them at that moment. Most of them were middle-aged, and they were dressed in long black robes with gray markings that made them look like ghosts. They sat quietly on the platforms, and when Su Ming cast his gaze over the seawater, he saw countless people meditating. They surrounded the platforms, and not a single sound could be heard. Besides the sound of the waves, it could be said that the place was silent. The Great Netherworld Tribe is a very quiet tribe, but it is also an extremely terrifying tribe. In terms of combat strength, they may not be as good as the people of the Sky Spirit Tribe, but the survival ability of the people of the Great Netherworld Tribe is terrifying. In fact, there was a saying at that time that if the disaster descended, perhaps the other tribes would perish, but Great Abyss Tribe would definitely not. This is a race that can rise to power again, even if there is only one tribe member left, the old man said slowly while staring at the black sea water. Su Ming was silent as he stared at the people from Great Abyss Tribe. He found another familiar feeling from them. It was a feeling that was different from that of berserkers. It was the feeling of souls. Spirit ascension. When Su Ming looked over, calm voices came from the platforms on the seawater. There were nearly 100 people on the hundreds of platforms, and at that moment, their spirits were ascending at the same time. This is something that the other tribes cannot do. Since they can change time and have clones, Great Abyss Tribe has a great advantage when it comes to spirit ascension. They can have multiple people have their spirits ascend at the same time, and from there, it will be easier for them to find the order hidden in the positions of the ancestral spirits. As the old man's words echoed in the air beside Su Ming, the All-Spirits Hall appeared in the sky again. Golden light shone 100,000 feet, and 2,000-something figures appeared. Soon after, the near 100 people on the platform flew up together and charged to their respective ancestral spirits. Su Ming watched them without shifting his gaze. He saw the members of Great Abyss Tribe turn into red figures and stare at the sky in a daze. Then, one person among the near 100 people shone with a piercing golden light that reached 100,000 feet. Once he successfully fused with an ancestral spirit, he threw his head back and roared. His roar was so strong that it contained an indescribable presence. It was not the presence of a cultivator, but the presence of an antecedental spirit. Waves roared, and huge waves surged into the sky. They spread through the area, and a brilliant light shone in the eyes of all the people from Great Abyss Tribe. They stared at the only person who had succeeded after all their people failed in the sky. All of them slowly stood up and bowed to him. With Great Abyss Tribe's talent, they should have been the fastest among our tribes to have 9 spirit ascensions. But the arrival of the Great Destruction will not give them or us this chance. The old man sighed softly. He lifted his right hand and seized the air. Immediately, the pictures in front of Su Ming shattered, and the world of fog returned to normal. With my level of cultivation, I can still deceive arid triads one last time and extract a portion of his memories for you to see and copy. This will be the last time. After this, I will give you a chance to choose. You can choose the Spirit Ascension platform of Great Berserker Tribe, Great Abyss Tribe, or my Heavenly Spirit Tribe to have your spirit ascend. The old man cast Su Ming a glance and swung his right hand. The world roared, and the world looked as if it had shrunk. When Su Ming's vision became clear, he had returned to the cave abode where the old man had been previously. He saw the white mountain standing tall in the fog. He also saw a stone platform at the top of the mountain at some unknown point of time. At that moment, there were ripples spreading out from the stone platform. When they enveloped the area, he could vaguely see an old figure sitting cross-legged on the stone platform. "You don't have to look anymore," Su Ming suddenly said. "I'm not a member of Heavenly Spirit Tribe. No matter how much I observe, it's useless. Senior, you can save the power of your cultivation base. There's no need to waste it." A resolute look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The more he saw, the better it would be for him. If he saw too many of the red figures he would turn into if he failed, his confidence would be affected. The old man's lifted right hand froze for a moment. A strange light shone in his eyes when he looked at Su Ming. Then between Great Abyss Tribe and Great Berserker Tribe, which tribe's Spirit Ascension platform will you choose? "I choose Great Berserker Tribe's Spirit Ascension platform." Su Ming's words were firm and resolute. Chapter 1297. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe cast Su Ming a deep glance, then lifted his right foot and took a step into the air. Ripples immediately spread out under his feet, and in an instant, he brought the land with him to the Berserker's tribe Su Ming had seen previously. White Mountain stood tall, and by its side was the Berserker's tribe. Not too far away was the Spirit Ascension platform that reached the sky. It was as if in the hands of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. As long as he wanted to, there was nothing in the universe that he could not do. Moving mountains and seas, shifting the land, reversing the universe, extracting arid triads' memories. All of these opened a door in Su Ming's mind, allowing him to see dazzling divine abilities and arts. You only need to successfully ascend your spirit once. The path of spirit ascension is arduous, and every single time you succeed, you will experience a drastic change. With your current level of cultivation, as long as you succeed in your first spirit ascension, your level of cultivation will increase by 10 times. But that is secondary. The most important thing is that your soul and your presence will become different from then on. You will no longer be a successor spirit, but an antecedental spirit. Even if you're the lowest antecedental spirit, you will still be able to stand at the top of the universe. It will be especially so when your presence fuses with your cultivation base and increases in your realm of life. Once you become an antecedental spirit, you will be able to bring out the true power of the ring on your finger. It will be a power that can kill those in Death Realm. Similarly, based on the cultivation system of the era after me, you had just stepped in a Fate Realm. But as long as you succeed in your first spirit ascension, you will be able to skip Fate Realm and master the imperishable power of Life Realm. In fact, if you can perfect your laws of fate within a short period of time in the world outside, then your level of cultivation will increase by leaps and bounds a second time. This is the legacy of spirit ascension. With it, it will not be impossible for you to step straight into Death Realm. This is a serendipity, but also a matter of life and death. I cannot help you as to whether you will succeed. It will all depend on you. The old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe stared at Su Ming with a profound look on his face. His expression was solemn. He longed for Su Ming to succeed, but it was just as he said. He could only give him the chance and could not help him. Unless he did not succeed in his 8th spirit ascension, but his 9th spirit ascension and became an ancestral spirit instead of an antecedental spirit. Only then would he have the right to help others have their spirits ascend, because at that time, he would already stand at the peak of the universe. I am Tian Bai. I wish you success. The old man wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed deeply towards Su Ming for the first time. Su Ming looked at the old man. In silence, he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed to the old man as well. Then, he swung his arm and charged towards Great Berserker Tribe's Spirit Ascension stage, which was not too far away from him. In an instant, he closed in and stood on the Spirit Ascension stage. Su Ming lifted his head and stared at the sky. His expression was calm, and the scene he had seen previously appeared in his mind. It was as if at that moment, there were also figures from countless years ago in Great Berserker Tribe below him, and all of them were shouting the word Berserker. I didn't choose Great Abyss Realm because I have a greater sense of belonging to the Berserkers. I've always believed that I am a Berserker, and I am the Berserkers' god of Berserkers. Su Ming lifted his head. At that moment, an indescribable presence surrounded him. It formed a layer of distortions, and when the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe saw it, his pupils shrank. This junior has two different presences belonging to Great Berserker Tribe and Great Abyss Realm. It doesn't seem like it was caused by intermarriage. Someone must have intentionally guided him to let a member of Great Abyss Realm's bloodline grow up in Great Berserker Tribe. In fact, he even has the true race's enlightenment on him. The old man stared at Su Ming. In truth, when he first saw Su Ming, his heart had not been as calm as it seemed. All of this was not because of Su Ming's Great Berserker Tribe presence or because of Great Abyss Realm's blood. Instead, it was because of the race's enlightenment that the old man had never seen on all the people who had entered over the course of countless years. It was the Berserker's initiation, but it was also the race's enlightenment. A race's enlightenment is a race's power of enlightenment. In the past, only the next tribe elder had the right to receive the inheritance from the previous tribe elder. In fact, even during the later stages of the tribe, while there were more inheritances of this sort, most of them were fake enlightenments. The value of those who received the fake enlightenments was to test which of the ancestral spirits was correct so that they could pave the way for the person who had the true right to receive the race's enlightenment. Because the true goal of the race's enlightenment is not to make the member of the race stronger, but to give him the right to have his spirit ascend. In fact, even if he failed once, he would not turn into a red figure. In the current era, those who know about this race's enlightenment should be incredibly rare. This is a right that only one person in a race can receive in every generation. This is the one and only ancestral spirit watch given to each race by the ancestral spirits in the past. The old man stared at Su Ming, and his mind tumbled about restlessly. He could tell that Su Ming possessed the race's enlightenment because he was the hope Great Berserker Tribe had left behind to this day. It was the hope for a race to rise to power. That was why the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe had told Su Ming so many things of the past. That was why he had asked Su Ming to have his spirit ascend and even activated his cultivation base to obtain the memories of arid triads, well, so that Su Ming could observe it. This was a treatment that all the people who had stepped into this place in the past had never experienced before. Most of the people in the past were forcefully controlled by the old man to have their spirits ascend. They did not know how to talk to each other, and neither did they carry out any sort of trade. Everything had to be carried out according to the old man's will. But when it came to Su Ming, the old man hesitated. He could not do this, because Su Ming possessed the race's enlightenment. It was Great Berserker Tribe's only hope at that moment, and he could not wipe it away. In fact, he was already prepared to give up and send Su Ming away if he failed even once. Because he was also one of the races in Wei, and because Su Ming could be said to be a true member of the younger generation in his tribe. Because Su Ming's arrival fulfilled the requirements of the legacy. In fact, it could be said that he was the first person over countless years who fulfilled the requirements of the legacy and did not use any other methods to come to this place. Su Ming's judgment of the sun's sinking talisman in the world outside was only partial. His judgment was that the sun's sinking talisman had been activated because of the soul of the clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole. But in truth, The true reason for its activation was the race's enlightenment in Su Ming's body. Seed of great berserker tribe. Why is it that I can sense the presence of an old friend in the race's enlightenment on you? Is it you? But I clearly saw you die in anguish while searching for your tribe's future, hope in the illusion of great you created in the past. The old man fell silent. It should be you. I won't wipe off the seed of great berserker tribe. I definitely won't. The old man stared at Su Ming. At that moment, his heart suddenly trembled, because at that moment, when Su Ming lifted his head to look at the sky on the platform, his back looked as if it had fused with the world. More accurately speaking, he did not fuse with the world, but with great berserker tribe on the ground. It was as if Su Ming's presence had stirred up some sort of strange change at that instant, stirring up some sort of ripple in the land of berserkers. Those ripples were like calm water that had suddenly started boiling. Waves of repulsive force instantly appeared, but it did not come from Su Ming. Instead, it came from the projection of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe and the White Mountain. This change caused the old man's heart to tremble, and at the same time, he became even more certain that he could sense the race's enlightenment on Su Ming's body. In fact, he could even sense a strong feeling that the person they had been waiting for had finally appeared in the Berserkers tribe after waiting for an endless amount of years. Soon after, the old man's pupils shrank. Wisps of indistinct souls suddenly appeared in the ruins of great Berserker tribe, the land where the Berserkers had once lived. They might be indistinct, and Su Ming could not see them, but the old man could clearly see them. They were souls that should have long since disappeared in the passage of time. They were wisps of obsession, wisps of willpower that defended the land and waited for the Berserkers to rise to power. They had always been there. They did not want to disappear from a universe and did not want to sleep in the emptiness of time. They had always surrounded the land and waited. At that moment, they seemed to have found the person they had been waiting for. More souls appeared. In just the span of a few breaths, there were already more than 1 million souls in the area, and there were still more appearing. There were quite a number of them that made the old man shudder when he saw them, because he was familiar with them. They were his friends who were once his friends. Old friend, you calculated the Berserker's sky in the illusion of great you in the past, and searched for the hope of the Berserkers during the disaster. Is he the hope you found in the past? For him, did you carry out the creation against the ancients? As he mumbled, more than 1 million souls appeared on the land. There were nearly 10 million of them. They surrounded the area quietly and stared at Su Ming, but he could not see them. Su Ming stared at the sky. At that moment, his will was raging in his heart, and a powerful wave of confidence gathered in his body without a single sound. I am the god of berserkers. I am the god of berserkers. It doesn't matter what my blood is or where I came from. From the moment I gained consciousness, I was a berserker. Even if my body is different from the others, and even if my soul is not a berserker, my will, my spirit, and my life belong to the berserkers. But my will, my spirit, and my life belong to the berserkers. I am a berserker. I am the god of berserkers. A powerful light shone in Su Ming's eyes. As he stood there, he did not know that at that moment, the more than 10 million berserker souls he could not see had erupted with a vast, invisible power. That presence swept together and formed a soundless bang, causing the projection of the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe to disappear. Even he was forced to retreat. When he looked into the distance, the old man saw a scene in shock that made him suck in a deep breath. He saw the presence of the 10 million souls gathering together around Su Ming to turn into a white dragon in the wind and snow. At the same time it charged into the sky, the white dragon threw its head back and roared. Its entire body turned crimson, and with madness and an unwillingness to accept their fate, it charged into the sky with the will of countless berserkers gathered together. Monthly votes. Also, I just heard the vice moderator say that the readers are not allowed to send private messages to the author. I think it's possible. I've received some before. If it's not possible, then please send your contact details to Wang Ping's vice moderator account about my daughter. I will take a look at it and then call you to communicate with you. Thank you for your kindness, everyone. Thank you. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.